You're listening to Bring Me the Axe. I'm Brian White, one half of this morbid equation, and I'm joined by my co-host and actual brother, Dave White. Dave, how you doing?
Whew, I am doing all right. You know, I have been paying attention to the pop culture podcasts lately, and I have learned more about Britney Spears and Jada Pinkett Smith in the last 2 weeks than I thought I would ever know in my life.
Yeah. I don't know much about them, but I guess there's a book out about what's her face.
There is. I mean, I can only assume this will come in handy at some point in the future. It must.
Yeah.
But I am still neutral on both of them, surprisingly. So, you know.
Yeah, I saw Britney Spears dancing with some knives. It was it was a little unsettling, quite frankly.
Yeah. It was. I don't know if it was supposed to be sexy or alarming, or both.
Yeah, I give her a pass because she's kind of been through it. So you know what, dance all you want with knives or whatever. I don't care.
That's my take on Britney Spears.
Yeah. So we practically grew up in neighborhood video stores, and the steady diet of utter garbage that those shops provided us with continues unabated to this day. There's no one else I enjoy chopping it up with more about trashy movies than Dave. Just before we get into it, here's a little housekeeping. You want to keep up with us between episodes, you can also find us on Instagram at Bring Me the Axe Pod. You can also find Dave at That Queer Wolf. We're having a good time over there. We have a lot of fun. We've also got a sweet website at bringmetheaxe.com. You can listen to all our past episodes and read the transcripts. You can also contact us directly at bringmetheaxepod@gmail.com with any questions, comments, or suggestions. Do let us know if there's a movie that you love and would like to hear us give it the business. Lastly, if you like what you hear, you can subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You'll be doing us a favor by leaving us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. And you can also do that on Spotify as well. It goes a long way. It helps us sort of gain visibility. It lets people know that we're worth listening to. So
yeah, I wish you'd do it. I wish you would do more of it.
Yeah, I've seen the number go up a little bit, so people are doing it. We give them a hard time, and and they actually do. So we'll continue to give you a hard time. Fucking do it. It takes.
Yeah, you just leave a review and just like, that one guy's real hilarious.
Yep.
And you don't have to say which one. It's pretty,
we can
obvious.
We can just quietly sort of assume that it's me, that it's you. Just make us feel good. That's what I'm saying. So I just want to get all that out of the way right at the top of the show. So tonight, we have finally arrived. It has been a bit of a slog. It was actually a bigger slog than I kind of thought it was. And I kind of...
Yeah, I'm real glad to not be in the 2000s anymore. The fucking goatee of eras for horror movies. The ironic mustache of horror movie eras.
Yeah. We are back in our comfort zone, like squarely in the comfort zone. And I'm so happy to be back in 1978. So we've been talking about it all month. We've been exploring it all month. The Strode-Myers struggle, and we have finally arrived at the one that we really, really wanted to talk about.
I have seen this movie a billion fucking times, and every single time, and I feel this way about Black Christmas too. Trust me, Black Christmas will be more jubilant than this one is. But I have seen this so many fucking times. And every single time I find new things about it that I am incredibly impressed by.
I never get tired of it. And I could not possibly tell you how many times I've seen this movie. I have no idea. But it's easily in the dozens, especially since I've made it a point every year for the last decade to watch it on Halloween, as a thing. So
I watch it at least once a year, probably more than that though.
Yeah. So, I mean, this year alone, I think I've watched it 3 times. I mean, with the recent, viewings for this episode included. But yeah, man, I never get tired of it. I always find something new to appreciate about it. It's just so fucking good. I can't imagine being John Carpenter at 30 years old and just nailing it so significantly like this. So, here's a little taste.
Halloween night. A small American town. 15 years ago. Michael?
I spent 8 years trying to reach him. and then another 7 trying to keep him locked up because I realized that what was living behind that boy's eyes was purely and simply evil. I think he'll come back.
Exploring uncharted territory.
Totally charted.
Just talk.
Sure. The only reason she babysits is to have
Halloween.
Okay, come on out.
Halloween. The night he came home.
Halloween, the night he came home. Man.
Or if you like, the trick was to stay alive. That was the other tagline.
What was it?
The trick was to stay alive.
Oh, no shit.
That is a piece of shit tagline. I'm glad they went with the other one.
Yeah. I've never seen that. Is that on the Ghana poster?
No, it was on the. I saw it on IMDb, and I was like, that can't be right. People are just making this shit up.
Yeah. I think IMDb is a little bit like Wikipedia, where like pretty much anybody can edit to up to.
I did eventually see it on one of the posters, though.
Oh, no shit.
But IMDb also says the alternate title was "He Came Home for Halloween," and I thought, well, that's just a terrible title.
Yeah, that can't be right. Because like this movie, there's a lot of stories about the sort of the progression toward what we ultimately get, and like there's the rumor that the movie was originally called The Babysitter Murders is like really only partially correct. I think it was The Babysitter Murders for approximately 5 minutes when Irwin Yablans.
And I believe that title comes from Bob Clark.
Oh, okay.
Because there was a babysitter killer in Canada.
Oh.
It's partially what Black Christmas is based on.
Oh, no shit. Yeah, because when to hear Irwin Yablans talk about it, it's he conceived of it on a flight, and by the time he landed, he had the title Halloween.
Yeah, I think everybody else is always, like, in everything I've seen and read, everybody is like, no, it was going to be called Halloween pretty much from the start.
Yeah.
Like, that was just what we were going to call it.
Yeah.
Because there had never been a movie called Halloween. He was like, I looked up everything. I looked it up everywhere. It had never really been used in any titles.
What luck? Like, how is this even possible? I mean, it's so obvious.
It's really hard. It's hard to watch this movie and watch it with the understanding that it had never existed before. Like, nothing like this had really existed before. Not quite like this.
Right, because I've got a bunch of notes, particularly about the mask and the way that they kind of tease the shape throughout the entire movie. And I think a lot of it is probably just conjecture, because I've never seen anything, and I've never actually read anything from anybody who's ever actually saw the movie when it first came out. But it is, given what comes after it, it is hard to imagine a time when a movie like this was brand new and nobody had ever really seen anything like it. Because, it wasn't born in a vacuum. It comes from a couple of very obvious sources, and everybody's constantly, saying, well, it was Black Christmas played a role.
But I mean, if you watch the progression, like you say, modern horror, let's say it starts with Rosemary's Baby.
Yeah.
And then you get Last House on the Left, and then Texas Chainsaw, and Black Christmas, and then this.
Yeah, like I actually kind of lump Texas Chainsaw in with the last podcast, with the Last House on the Left, crowd, because I mean, tonally, thematically, they're very similar.
Yeah, they're very much. And I think this one is much more like Rosemary's Baby in that it takes. And I actually think this movie kind of stands on its own, but I think of that group, it's more like that, in that it takes this sort of classic horror tropes and that slow build dread and injects it with like modern fear. But I think in the case of Halloween, the modern elements of it are they're so much more like relevant to the story, and they're so much more obvious, and they feel so much more modern. Because like witches and Satan, it's not real, so it's not like, it's hard to be like, well, people were afraid of it. I know people were afraid of it at the time. Yeah. I absolutely understand that. But like, this is real terror because this reflects that fear, that sort of new modern fear of like anonymous violence.
Yeah.
And there had never been a movie that had taken classic horror, like of the 50s and 40s and kind of blended it with like real world terror.
Yeah. There's also the factor of it taking place in the suburbs.
Yes.
Because, even today, horror typically takes place in a couple of like reliable locations, right? You're either in the remote backwoods, or a dense city, but like the suburbs.
And each of them is loaded. Like each one reflects a particular kind of social phobia.
Yeah. But like this is one that actually takes it, because I mean the entire fucking thrust for society to move to the suburbs was to get away from the wicked city. Like this.
And by that they mean black people.
Yes,
that is essentially what they were trying to get away from.
Yeah. So it takes a faceless terror and it puts it in a place where everybody kind of thought that they were safe.
What I think is really interesting, and this is like maybe 5 or 6 months ago, maybe a little bit more, I was listening to a podcast, and I won't say which one because I really like it. This, I think, was just a misstep on their part. And they're a little bit, younger, not that much younger, but like maybe not as well versed in the genre, and they're younger women. And it was listening to them talk about this movie it was as though they could not conceive of a movie that didn't, that existed before all of the fucking tropes and all of the, the sort of the Carol Clover of it all, and this like the intersections of feminism and horror. They couldn't conceive of a movie that did not abide by 1980s tropes that sort of predated it.
Yeah.
And so their entire analysis of it and their entire perception of this movie was from that perspective. And I wouldn't dismiss that entirely, because I think as much as John Carpenter says, it's not about that. It's like, well, there's lots of unconscious things that work their way into creative output that we might not notice at the time, but it's still there. I don't think this movie, because Carol Clover like really goes into this one in Men, Women, and Chainsaws. And I don't think that's really all that fair, because I don't think this is I don't think it's a misogynist movie at all. I think it's actually quite feminist in a lot of ways.
Yeah. So a thing that I read that book, Jesus Christ, 20 years ago. And
that's the other thing. It's a little bit dated at this
That's
point.
kind of what I want to address about it is the critique.
To begin with, it's an academic discourse that doesn't have a lot of relevance in sort of pop culture.
No, and the thing that also is that I think is kind of important is that it is a bit of an antique in terms of feminism. I think that it's really kind of it's an item of like the second wave.
Yeah, which is it's always hard.
It's a vastly different perspective than the way that sort of feminist criticism.
And for people who probably may not know, the second wave of feminism has a lot to do with it's very 70s, sort of rooted in 70s, late 70s, early 80s ish. It's very much about like violence and that basically all male interaction with women is kind of inherently violent and based on power dynamics, and to a certain extent that is true. However, it got really blown out of proportion, and they really ended up undermining their own arguments a lot.
Yeah. Things have just evolved in new ways. A lot of what was set down in that book, I think, took root and holds it, and I think that it's definitely very legitimate. It's a very enjoyable read for something that's an academic work, but it's a little dated, and I tend to sort of dismiss the kind of virgin survivor trope.
Well, because in this case, I don't think that holds at all. Like I don't think that's
no. Also,
I
think we kind of have Scream to thank for that, because it's a very big piece of the second act is all about it's Randy's big speech.
And a lot of what is, and I think Men, Women, and Chainsaws it's still a fundamental. It's like a core text in film studies of sort of that subgenre, I guess, that particular domain. But it is a little bit older, and I think a lot of what it really is kind of taking aim at is the shit that comes like Friday the 13th and after, which is like everybody in these movies is basically just cannon fodder, especially women.
Yeah.
And those movies are misogynistic.
Yeah. Oh yeah. This is not to say that it's off base. Like it's,
and that's why I don't want to dismiss that argument.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to like outright dismiss it, because I think that as much as Carpenter says it's not that, and I don't think he intended it for it to be that way. I still think that a lot of the sort of social norms have a way of working their way in, and I think had Debra Hill not been so actively involved,
this was my next point.
It probably would have been.
I think that if it were not for her, it would have been a way different movie.
I mean, he did the thing that everybody wants to do. Like, you want directors, if you don't know how a certain thing should be played, if you're a white person and you're writing a movie about black people, you shouldn't do that. You should go ask black people about black people stuff. In this case, he's writing about women. He needed to find someone who understood women, because he clearly could not.
Yeah.
And he did the thing that most people, I think, are probably, at least in films, maybe a little too arrogant to do.
Yeah. Also, we're going to find out. This movie is a real ship in a bottle. Yeah. In the stuff that came before it, they didn't have the time. Also, it was all fucking men. So it's not top of mind. As I say, we're going to get to it in the notes. She is the secret sauce that makes this whole fucking thing work. So yeah, here's some facts. The year was 1978, as we all know. So to kind of contrast this is our usual bit with other movies released that year. Let's put this up against some other movies that were released in 1978. Number 1, I Spit on Your Grave. Yeah.
Yikes.
Yep. Number 2, Martin. Which is, and I don't think we've ever actually talked about Martin. Martin is my favorite not zombie Romero movie.
No, okay. Yeah. I buy it. It's a thoughtful movie.
Yeah.
It's an interesting movie. I don't think it was what he wanted it to be.
Yeah. But it's going back to the comment. Budget, and it was always Romero's worst enemy. Number 3, The Fury.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep. That's De Palma's Scanners movie. Also, number 4, The Grapes of Death.
What the fuck is that?
That's Jean Rollins' zombie thing.
Sexy zombies.
And lastly,
I just assume everything he made is sexy.
Oh yeah, it's 100%. When all you got is porn stars for your horror movies, they're gonna be sexy one way or the other. And lastly, number 5, Dawn of the Dead.
Heard of it?
Yep, little known movie. So yeah, this stands in stark contrast to all of them. Not the first masked mass murderer movie. I think the Town That Dreaded Sunset.
Town That Dreaded Sundown, I think, is a little bit later, isn't it? Maybe not. Maybe 76.
It's a couple of years before, yeah. But yeah, way different movie. But
also, that was like a super low budget. It's the guy who made Boggy Creek.
Yep.
I can't remember his name.
It's pretty good, I think.
It is surprisingly good for what it is.
Yeah. Cast and crew. The director is John Carpenter, my all-time favorite movie director.
Same.
Yeah. He sums up everything that I love about low budgets and genre movies. He was hired to turn a profit on short money. His priority was always entertainment.
And can you imagine, you see this movie, it's like the guy who made Assault on Precinct 13, which is a movie I very much like, made this afterwards.
Yeah.
And they are, the quality of them is vastly different.
It is. This is a humongous upgrade. Like, I love Assault on Precinct 13, but it wears its limitations on its sleeve. It doesn't suffer for them, but it's not Halloween. Halloween is a humongous upgrade.
And he is also someone who works, I think, oddly, he works very well with simplicity, but also with big, if you look at something like Big Trouble in Little China, that is a big story.
Yeah.
And it's not it kind of gets close to going off the rails, but like he keeps that together as well. So he's capable of working on both sides. I think it's when it gets too big it's when you start to get a little precarious.
Yes. This, I don't know if Halloween was the first Carpenter movie I saw or not. I can't remember when do you remember the first time you saw this?
I don't. It had to be. I'm gonna guess late '80s, early '90s.
It had to be. I know I saw it on.
I think Big Trouble in Little China is probably the first one I saw because it's the one that's most kid friendly.
Yeah, I know I saw it on TV, but I can't remember if I saw this one first or if I saw Escape from New York first, because I saw Escape from New York when I was 10, and it immediately grabbed me. And we're going to talk about all the fucking reasons why, because those reasons translate directly to the appeal of Halloween to me. But yeah, I saw Escape from New York, and it immediately became my favorite movie from the moment I saw it. And it's still, if
you were 10 when you saw it, no, that would have been too young for that.
WLVI used to do a thing called Halloween Hell Week in the week, in the week leading up to Halloween. And I remember it was always the same program.
It's whatever they could get for cheap.
I can't remember what the first one was, but they ran Omen and Omen 2, and then they ran Halloween and Halloween 2. And on one of the years that they ran them, I caught both of them. I think I saw Halloween 2 first.
I'll tell you what, I watched Halloween 2 about 5 hours ago. That movie fucking sucks. When you watch them back to back, it is like, Jesus Christ. This movie had a director?
Yeah, I know. But it's also, in some of the prep for this, I also watched the insert footage that they shot in 1980
for the TV bit, one?
And it is crazy. It is fucking nuts.
It's real shitty. I remember the first time I saw that, and I was like, wow, this is wholly unnecessary.
Yeah. I mean, I get why they did it, but like, it's very, very wild, because like, it's only 2 years later, and it's all the same cast, including the kid who plays Kid Michael in this movie. But like,
is that him?
It is. And it's very clearly a couple of years later for everybody, because like they all look older, even little Michael.
Well, and fucking Jamie Lee Curtis has on that hideous wig that is like, is it a wig? Absolutely. It is 100%
yeah,
a wig.
because her hair was shorter at the time.
It was for, what the fuck was it called? We were just talking about it like 10 minutes ago. I can't remember what the movie was, but it was for a movie. Yeah. It might have been, what's the one with Eddie Murphy and...
it's not Trading Places. That was a few...
It's the same year.
Yeah. But it was a few years. Well, 1980 was Prom Night, I believe. So yeah. But also, let's see. Writer is Debra Hill, who was born in Haddonfield, New Jersey, and she's the secret sauce in John's creative process. And
she's fucking awesome on her own too.
So the way that I've always sort of seen their partnership is John covers the big picture. He's got the idea. She's the one who fills in the details. Like, she's the reason that Laurie, Annie, and Linda are more than just like knife bait in this movie. Like, why their conversations feel natural and real. Like, it's,
and I mean, literally everybody who has worked with, not just on this movie, but with them in general, will freely admits like she is the reason why this and other movies work so well.
Yeah,
because she was so good at the small shit.
Yep. And and so like because she's not just a writer on this, she's a producer, and she was the one who, when they took literally half of their shooting budget and dedicated it to like brand new cameras and lighting equipment, she was the one who took the rest and just made the whole fucking thing work by just cracking the whip constantly. All of his best movies feature significant creative input from her. And
like the shit she did on her own too. I mean, Clue and was 48 Hours, I think, was another one of hers.
Yes, I believe so. Yeah. But like, she let's say she goes on to do her own thing. Not very long after this, like little ways into the 80s, she breaks and goes off and sort of does her own thing. But honestly, I think
for unfortunate reasons,
the most fertile period of her career is working in tandem with John Carpenter. What is that like? What are those reasons? Because you've said that before, and I don't know that closely between them. I know that they were breaking up during the production of this movie.
I don't know if it's this one. I think it's the.
No. It was.
Is it this one?
It was this one because he had just done a TV thing with Adrienne Barbeau, and like a fucking asshole was like, "Hey, I'm in love with you. What do you think?" And she's like, "You're like practically fucking married to this woman." But then they, they get into it.
But anyways. Hey, it kind of worked out for them. I guess. I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
Life's hard. What the fuck do I know?
Yeah. But yeah, like, I mean, even after their breakup, they continue to work together amicably. And then, eventually
because she's more or less responsible for all of his best movies.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that.
And then once she goes, that's kind of when his career starts to
wobble for sure. And then it just,
a nosedive.
and then we're talking about fucking Memoirs of an Invisible Man.
Oh.
So cast, Oscar winner, Jamie Lee curtis obviously.
Yes.
She was originally hired as a marketing stunt due to her parents' Hollywood legacy. She's the daughter of Janet Leigh and Tony Curtis.
Because he wanted what's her face, June Lockhart's daughter. I can't remember her name.
I am drawing a blank also.
But she was already like committed to a bunch of shit. I think I wrote her name down.
But yeah, most particularly, like the big obvious draw here is her mother is in Psycho. So like. And Psycho,
they knew they could use it.
Yeah, and Psycho was like a obviously a major influence on this. As it turns out she's a fucking hell of an actress. Yep, and the role establishes a couple of the best known horror movie tropes: the final girl and the scream queen, and it's all thanks to Jamie.
Yep, and I'm gonna shoot a shitload of holes through that when we get there.
Coming up, Nick Castle as the Shape. And Nick, this is a quality I love. He gets the best people to wear the fucking mask. He gets a guy named Nick Castle and a guy named Dick Warlock.
Dick Warlock.
Dick.
Oh,
Warlock.
My favorite Michael Myers, Dick Warlock.
Dick Warlock.
Well, Debra Hill and then Dick Warlock. That's how I rank them.
Yeah. So yeah, Nick's not really an actor, but he's definitely a major factor in why Michael Myers is such a memorable character.
He says his whole reason for what. So he knew him, I think, from film school. They went to USC together.
That's so. Because I guess the story goes, John and Tommy Lee Wallace go to California together from Kentucky, and it's there that they meet Nick at USC. And
I guess he was just like, hey, because he was trying to do his own shit too, and he's like, hey, you mind if I just like come and hang out and watch? And he was like, well, you can come and hang out, but if you're gonna be here, you got to do something, because like everybody had like 8 million jobs.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so he was like, here, put this on and you're going to walk around on camera. And he was like, all right, should I do anything else? What's my motivation? He was like, just walk around. I don't have motivation.
Kill. That's your motivation.
He gave him like almost, there is one scene where he does actually direct him, and only one scene. Everything else, he was like, just walk.
Yeah, it's the head tilt. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So, so there's an actor named Tony Moran who plays Michael in the scene where the mask comes off. But Nick is the guy doing all the heavy lifting in this. And I'm going to talk about it in terms of like a Swiss watch. Like every little piece of this movie is working perfectly in concert with the others. And there's just, even though like his fucking direction was like, just stand there. Like, I don't know what it is about it. It's menacing in a way that like other roles are not. Rounding it all out is Donald Pleasance, who's a prolific English actor. You likely know him from one of two movies, this one or as Blofeld, the Bond villain in You Only Live Twice.
Not the wheelchair-bound monkey scientist? Or the Italian detective?
No. Or if you're like me, you know him as the President of the United States in Escape from New York. One of the weirdest casting decisions that I can think of. The role of Loomis ended up in his hands after Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee turned it down. Honestly, I can't see either one of those guys.
Because Peter Cushing looked at it and was like, no, absolutely not. I think Christopher Lee was like, I'm sorry, you don't have enough money. But I guess Christopher Lee, like years later, was like, you know what? I have always regretted saying no to that.
Yeah. But I'll tell you, I can't see anybody else in this role. Like if I try to kind of recontextualize it with Christopher Lee, like he's just got too much gravitas.
Yeah, you needed someone who was not as recognizable to American audiences.
Yeah. And Donald Pleasance is like perfectly anxious in the role of Sam Loomis.
I find him to be sort of like, he's kind of inconsequential.
That's the thing. We talked about it in the Rob Zombie one. Rob Zombie obviously feels the same way. I kind of feel like he's not terribly compelling. And in the end, he's kind of a Deus Ex.
A little bit obnoxious.
Yeah, I don't particularly like the character, but
every time they cut to him, I find myself being like, no, go back to the girls. I want that story.
This is the first time
shit about this guy.
Is the first time I'm being really analytical about this movie, like, because we got to talk about it to a sort of an audience, and so I'm like really kind of thinking about it, and it sort of occurred to me that 90% of the movie, he's just hanging out in the bushes next to the Myers house.
And it all feels a little bit to me like, well, he flew all the way here. We paid him a lot of money. We may as well get our money's worth?
I think
I
think they had him for something like 10 days, and he was the one who, obviously, established actor. He had some, things. They wanted a name that they could put on the poster. And so they paid him the most, but like they really just did not flex him. And who knows? It's he's one of the one character that I feel is just the weakest of the bunch.
Yeah.
So here's some notes.
Yeah, I mean, can you imagine if at the time they would have been like, hey, guess what? 30 years from now, you're going to be the least recognized person associated with this movie.
Oh God. And that's in spite of the fact that he's in like 6 of them. And that they fake his voice in the David Gordon Green ones. Like, I mean, he's an important element for these movies for some fucking reason. I don't know. We'll get there. This movie premiered, of all places, in Kansas City on October 25th, 1978.
Do you think they expected this to be like a regional thing? Like just sort of a regional hit?
No. So the original plan for Compass was they were going to produce it, and then they were just going to sell it to one of the majors for like a flat fee. And that was the plan. Like they get, they say like, $3 million or whatever. And then, MGM buys it for $3 million, and then they do what they will with it. But when the majors saw it, they were like, fuck this. Like, this is bullshit. Like a bunch of idiots.
Well, do you know the story though? You know why that happened? Because he originally showed it to them without music.
Oh, no.
And they were like, no, this isn't scary. It's kind of boring, actually. And he was like, shit, did I just spend all of this time and all this money making a terrible movie? And then he went back and showed, I guess eventually he showed people the one with the soundtrack, and they were like, that's the most terrifying thing I've ever seen.
Yeah, I think, the thing was this movie, when they couldn't sell it, they were like, okay, so we'll just do a regional rollout, which is pretty standard for independent stuff at the time. But I believe it was in 1980 when it's had a few years to go. It's got a reputation. And this is when like the TV studios were like, we want to run this thing.
We should say this movie did not do well when it came out. Not at first.
It was a modest success at first. And
it was critically assailed.
Yeah. But yeah, it's often told that John took the project on for a salary of $10,000 from the film's budget of $300,000, but that's not exactly right. So what John did was he negotiated a rather low salary, but what it did was it bought him complete creative control. And so this basically, when they produce a movie, if you don't have that sort of clause in your contract, you're going to get 1,000 fucking producer notes throughout it, and you're going to have to address them in it. Like, you've heard nightmare stories about producer notes, like particularly when it has to do with the fucking Weinsteins. Rob Zombie tells a story about how Bob Weinstein in the middle of production sent him this like note that was like, Michael Myers should wear a necklace of earrings. And he's like, we've shot like 75% of this movie. Like you
shouldn't sexually assault actors. I guess neither one of us is getting what we want.
Yeah. So he basically gets final cut on this. Obviously,
he also gets his name above the title.
That's an important thing, and this is especially important for me because John Carpenter is probably the first director who I became like a fan of, because like when I was a kid, I didn't pay attention to that sort of thing. I didn't give a shit about it. It was who the people making the movies were not important to me, but because his name was on it, it became a thing. Like, I like Escape from New York a lot. And so here's another movie by the same guy who made that I'm probably going to like.
He is a brand.
Yeah.
And part of that, I think, has something to do with the multiple roles that he plays. Like there's a, I don't know if it's a Directors Guild thing or it's one of the guilds, I think. It has something to do with how many things you're doing. It's why it's like, this is Stephen King's Maximum Overdrive. Right. It has to do with the multiple roles.
Yeah, I think, what was it? Julia told us that if Stephen King wrote the script for the movie, it was Stephen King's blah, blah, blah. In this case, it was just a contract thing. And then eventually it becomes kind of part of his brand. They put his name on everything. Yeah. So like before I really kind of came to sort of be like a film fan, like if I saw something that said John Carpenter, like I was like, oh shit, I got to see that. But also he got to do the music. He wanted to do the music on it, and thank fucking God he did the music on it. But also a part of this salary negotiation was he negotiated points on the movie's back end, meaning that he got a piece of the profits.
Which smart move.
I know, probably the best business deal he ever made in his entire life. So once the movie started to roll out and become very popular, he started making a shitload of fucking money. Like he's probably made more money off of this movie than anything else that he's ever done in his career. I mean, he probably could have just made Halloween and then fucking coasted for the rest of his life.
Oh, and then he made a bunch of other awesome movies.
And then he made a bunch of fucking great movies. Yeah. Until the Blair Witch Project broke the record, Halloween was the most profitable independent movie ever made. It held the record.
Yeah, you know who hates that movie?
I don't hate it, but I don't like it. I don't. That movie was. They did all the post production for Blair Witch in Florida at UCF when I was living down there, and they premiered it at a sort of local art house called the Enzion. And a friend of mine was like, "Hey, there's a free movie over at the Enzion tonight. Something about a witch." And so I was like, "Hey, niece, you want to go see this?" And she was like, we had nothing going on. We were fucking kids at the time. So we went and we watched it. And then the movie was over. We were like, so that's it, huh? And they did a big, like, they opened up, they brought out a mic to do like a Q&A thing. And like, literally it was a packed theater. It was a fucking free movie in Orlando, Florida. And like, everybody just got up and left. And
yeah, so I was like, sir, I have a question. What the fuck was that?
What the hell was that?
What kind of horse shit is this?
Yeah,
I want my money back.
So imagine my surprise when, like, a year later, it's there's people going down to fucking Maryland to look for the missing cast members. I was like, wasn't that
a
fucking
lesson in viral marketing?
I know. I was like, wasn't that fucking movie we just saw? Like, what the hell? Yeah. So
I mean, interestingly enough, this Halloween was supposed to be a ghosty haunted house spooky kind of movie too.
Yeah.
Thankfully, it was not. He made better choices.
Yeah. So
put characters in it.
The name Michael Myers was taken from the head of Miracle Films, which is a British film distributor that handled the release of Assault on Precinct 13.
Yeah, John Carpenter has openly admitted many times that he is terrible at coming up with names. Yep. So he's just like, you're Alfred Hitchcock. That's your character's name.
You're Guy Incognito.
I mean, that's why his name, the doctor is Sam Loomis.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, Sam Loomis obviously is Marion Crane's boyfriend, played by John Gavin in Psycho.
I mean, it's throughout the whole thing. Like, eventually you get to a point where, like, characters are actually named Tommy Wallace.
Yeah. Tommy Doyle and Lindsay Wallace. I think, what is it? Is it Halloween 3 where there's actually a character named Nick Castle?
I think so.
Yeah. But, my God. Yeah, I mean, I fucking love him. I mean, he's a tremendously creative character, just cannot fucking come up with names. But
you get the feeling that he's just like, I don't know, that doesn't matter. Yeah. Call him Susan. It doesn't fucking matter.
George Glass.
Exactly.
So there were 2 mask concepts made for this movie. One of them is obviously the iconic shape mask, which was originated from a rubber Captain Kirk mask made by Don Post Studios. But the original plan for the shape was to have him wear like a sort of adult version of the child Michael's costume. And so when Tommy Lee Wallace went out looking for masks, because I don't think that until they had the mask, the script was never terribly specific about what Michael looks like. And so
no, and he said Tommy Lee Wallace says that he gave him like a bunch of money, and he was like, here, we need a costume for this thing, and I don't know what it's going to be, but go to a costume store and get something.
Yeah.
So he came back with 2 masks.
Yeah, he comes back. So obviously the Don Post Kirk mask. The other is a Weary Willie mask. So Weary Willie was
no. It's not that. Is it that?
Yeah, because it's the
clown.
Yeah, the hobo clown.
Yeah.
And which, man, that Weary Willie story is fucking crazy on its own.
That's the train one, the leg story, right?
No, that's the one where the character was passed down through 3 generations of the same of family who played it, and
Emmett Kelly.
Yes, Emma Kelly.
The Emma Kelly mask.
And each one of them became obsessed with the character to a point where they either referred to themselves as if they were this character, or they referred to Weary Willie as if he were a real person, kind of in the same way that like Alice Cooper got really confused towards
or Edgar Bergen.
Yeah.
Edgar Bergen would be like, "This is my son." It's like, no, that's a ventriloquist dummy. You have actual children, sir. You terrible, terrible man.
Yeah. Put that in the bank for Morbid.
That's right, everybody. Go look up Edgar Bergen and find out why Candace Bergen hated her father. It is hilarious and tragic.
Oh man. But yeah, so it was what the mask that I'm trying to describe is it's a clown, but he's also like a hobo. And so
he's like an adult version of the Littlest Hobo. Like he's a traditional hobo.
Yeah, I think I'm not positive, but I think that the mask that gets pulled off of Michael at the beginning of the movie is the unused mask.
So he said what they did was he came back with these 2 masks and they were like, all right, let's try them out and figure out which one is which. And he comes out with the one that one, and they're like, yeah, it's pretty creepy
because they modified both of them. So obviously,
he didn't do much to the first one, but the second one he cuts the eye holes bigger.
Yeah,
and really just so he could see out of it. And move around in it.
Right, because
if kind of fluffs up the hair a little bit.
We'll put it on Instagram, but you could find the original Kirk mask fairly easily, and it's a fucked up looking mask.
It is real uncanny valley.
It was taken from a mold that they did for the Devil's Reign. So it's not really Captain Kirk. It's just William Shatner, but it was patterned and sold.
Like, what's worse than a Captain Kirk mask? A William Shatner mask?
yeah. So it's done after that, but it was branded. It was sold next to a Spock mask also, and the Spock one looks like Leonard Nimoy. The Kirk one looks like
William Shatner in Devil's Reign.
Looks like yeah.
So, a little bit bloated. Terrible.
Yeah, but the Weary Willie mask, I guess what Tommy Lee Wallace did with it was he just kind of like glued red hair to it. And they were like, okay, yeah, all right. But then they put the other mask on and we're like, holy shit, that's the one. Because he treated...
And the reason why is because of the eye holes.
Really?
Because they're so big, and you can see this in the movie too. It's why some of the close-ups look really cool.
I have a ton of notes about that because my favorite...
They just look black.
That's my favorite quality of it is in future sequels. I mean, even as early as Halloween 2, you can see Michael's eyes through the mask, and it just takes all the fucking menace out of it. For me, I don't know how other people feel about it.
No, it was the first thing I noticed when I watched it today. I was like, oh, that is a distinct difference.
Yeah, because there's a couple of times where you can kind of see Nick's eyes through the mask, but really they're just 2 black fucking pools throughout the whole thing. And the whole point is there's nothing behind the mask, it's just, yeah. So it's a hell of a mask, man.
So as soon as they see that, they're like, that's your mask right there.
Right. Cause
when you pair it with something equally banal.
Yeah. Cause also we're going to hear a lot about it as I talk about it, but we go a very long time before we actually see the shape up close. We see
half of this movie is just about teenage girls.
Yeah, we see him we see him in the distance, but the detail is hard to make out, and it's just the featureless face. Eventually, once they settle on the mask, John kind of does a rewrite and starts to really sort of describe it. And the original, you can find the script fairly easily online, but the original opening, the title sequence, which we now see with the kind of the zooming shot on the pumpkin, originally it was a zoom in on the mask. That's just how much they like it.
What I will say, I'll point this out because before we actually get into the movie of it, the fact that you just see him in sort of vague distance a lot, I think is kind of key to this idea of the whole concept of the final girl and how it gets applied to this movie. And I don't want to harp on this too much. I could easily get caught up in this argument and fucking derail us completely. But I think what's most interesting is that you have these 3 characters, And, obviously people are like, well, these are the two that are doing drugs and they're having sex, and she's this sort of chaste girl. And I don't think that's true at all.
It's not. She fucking smokes weed with Annie.
Yeah. And the only reason she's not having sex is because she doesn't have a boyfriend, though she expresses interest in both of those things.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
But the only reason that she lives and they don't is because she has a vague awareness that something's going on. Like, she kind of knows she's in a horror movie where the other two don't.
Yeah, and there is a moment in the movie that I can put a pin in it when she realizes that something is very wrong, and her consciousness shifts in a very significant part. And that's when she finds Annie's keys in the wrong house.
The only reason she doesn't die is because Loomis runs up the stairs and shoots it.
Yeah.
If Loomis didn't run up the stairs, she would also have been killed.
Yeah.
So the argument falls apart. But I hate that argument because I love all three of these characters so fucking much. I love them more than I think I've loved any trio of characters in movies.
Yeah.
They're just incredible.
It is watching them and sort of like listening to them talk is like it's almost as though you're kind of a part of their little circle, But yeah, it's so fucking good.
I think that's why I get so uppity when people are like, "Oh, well, it's just another slasher." I'm just like, "Why don't you shut your fucking mouth?"
Yeah, I'll punch
I'm going to tell you
in the fucking face.
I'm going to tell you why these fucking queens are the greatest trio of friends in any film ever made.
Yeah. Yep. So half of the movie's $300,000 budget went to Dean Cundy's very specific camera and lighting needs, and that was
which surprisingly, this is the first time that the Panaglide camera, which is the camera they're using.
Yep.
If you don't know what a Panaglide camera is, it's essentially a camera that attaches to your whole body.
It's a steady cam.
You move with it.
It's the very first steady cam. This was not the first movie to use it, but it was
the first movie to use it extensively.
Yeah, it was
one of the first movies to use it at all, but it was the first one to use it. This is not the first movie to use killer POV. That was Peeping Tom.
Yeah. But
which is also an awesome movie that everyone should go watch.
Yeah, also technically speaking, this movie, the photography is as much a part of the storytelling as the fucking script is.
Because Dean Cundy is like the one of the greatest camera operators ever.
It's amazing. Okay, so so to kind of finish it out, like the importance of this decision is they sunk half of a fucking tiny little movie budget, $300,000, even in 1978, not a lot of money. No. And to spend half of it,
I think like maybe a quarter of it, all like so that half of it goes to Panaglide, and then like a little less than a quarter of it goes to Donald Pleasance.
Yeah. So yeah, they're paying their cast peanuts. They're modifying $2 Halloween masks. They're literally recycling leaves to fake an autumn in California, and they're doing all these little belt tightening considerations.
Jamie Lee Curtis is back there making fucking peanut butter sandwiches for everybody, and she is not on camera.
Yep. But they gave Dean Cundy carte blanche, and it ends up working out like fucking crazy.
And I recommend, if anybody has the commentary track with Dean Cundy, it's worth listening to.
Yep.
It's funny because Tommy Lee Wallace is eating through the whole thing, but to listen to them talk, so it's Dean Cundy, Tommy Lee Wallace, and Nick Castle. Nick Castle's just sort of there, like he doesn't have much to contribute, but Tommy Lee Wallace and Dean Cundy are obviously sort of integral parts of the movie, and to listen to them talk is really interesting. But they also, and you get this from the movie in general, but they all really like each other, and they still really like each other. John Carpenter said this was the last time we all just had a ton of fun making a movie together, because the stakes obviously get, exponentially raised after he makes this.
Yeah.
But he was like, we were just a scrappy ragtag team of like kids making a movie, and we had a blast making this movie.
Yep.
And you can tell the way they talk about it is like they still look back on it so fondly, and you just don't get that anymore.
Yeah, I will say this: I've listened to a bunch of the like commentary tracks on John Carpenter DVDs and Blu-rays, and they're probably some of my favorites, even the ones that don't involve him. Obviously, the ones of him and Kurt Russell are the absolute best of any commentary track I've ever heard. But like, yeah,
because it's basically just Kurt Russell laughing while John Carpenter is like cracking him up with jokes.
Yeah.
Because in every one of them, I guarantee John Carpenter high as hell.
Oh, Jesus Christ, yeah. So yeah, getting back to it, Dean Cundy, one of Debra Hill's hires.
Awesome move.
Yep, they worked together on cheap drive-in trash before this. Dean Cundy worked. Both of them worked for Graydon Clark on titles like Satan's Cheerleaders.
Yep.
But
which is an awful movie.
It's fucking terrible. They also worked to get Debra Hill did not, but Dean Cundy worked on Graydon Clark in Without Warning, which I recently did on the Saucer Cinema podcast. And that movie is bananas, but the cinematography, fucking amazing.
And I mean, Dean Cundy, for those who don't know, would go on to shoot Who Framed Roger Rabbit, Jurassic Park. Like every fucking movie that is awesome to look at probably has.
He has an innate understanding of the way that cameras and lenses and lighting all work together, and
except for when they just buy a Panaglide camera, because he has a lot to say about that.
Yeah. But like he has a very distinct look. It really comes to life in Escape from New York. Basically, any movie that he works on that involves a lot of nighttime shots, it's when he does his best fucking work. He's absolutely amazing. And the way that he composes shots in this movie, like I said, the darkness becomes a character as much as like Michael Myers is a character.
Yeah, he is a visual storyteller in a way that you don't see a lot. And he actually gets into that quite a lot. Like, there are particular shots that every time he'll be like, whoa, hold on. I love this. Like he says the over the shoulder shots, like the hedge as she's walking away.
Yeah.
Like he's like, that is one of my proudest moments right there.
God. Yeah. So we cannot possibly talk about this movie without talking about the soundtrack.
Holy crap.
My God. I've got so many. So let's just do it.
So this is listed as AFI's it's in their top 100. I don't know where it sits. I think it's kind of higher, but I think it should be, I'm going to say top 20 film scores of all time.
I'm surprised that it's not. I think that it is. Yeah, it's that melody is so recognizable. It's up there with the fucking shower scene. You know, I can think of it. There's not too many movie like themes like fucking Star Wars or Superman. Jaws. Like
that, or like Bernard Herrmann's like the shit he did for Psycho and Vertigo.
Yeah.
Jaws, absolutely. Like, but I think it is right up there with Jaws.
Right up there.
It is a character in this film.
Yeah.
And it is an essential character in this film.
So part of his deal with Compass, he insisted on composing the entire thing, and he did it in 3 fucking days.
Yep.
With a piano and a Prophet 5 synthesizer.
And he's always like, well, I'm not much of a musician. To which I say, shut up.
Shut the fuck up, John. Yeah. So our theme for this show was composed on a software version of it.
He has inspired like an entire genre of music. Like he was inspired by a lot of what was going on in Italy at the time. People like Piero Umiliani, who was starting to experiment with electronics. And a lot of like the older Italian guys are starting to experiment with electronics. And he kind of is inspired a little bit by them, a little bit by his father, and a little bit by the fact that he is just a very creative person who wants to try stuff.
Yeah. And that's the thing is the Prophet 5 was brand new when this movie came out, and it was not a cheap synthesizer.
No, you should fucking look at pictures of it.
Its whole deal was so with synthesizers, when you used to use an analog synth, you would turn it on and it was just a clean slate. So if you had a certain sound that you were working with, you had to program it every time you turned the synth on.
You basically had to be Tom Waits if you wanted to know how to use this.
Yeah. So what the Prophet 5 did was it added a bunch of microprocessors. And so this was one of the first synthesizers that remembered your patches. I personally, it has a really sort of distinct character to itself. It is a sound that I love. It's the synthesizer that built the fucking 80s. You've heard a million singles from the 80s that use it, like that main sort of melody from Like a Virgin. That's a Prophet 5. Mm-hmm. I think Billie Jean was done on a Prophet 5.
Because I think Like a Virgin is Giorgio Moroder.
Yeah. Moroder used it very extensively. I said,
Giorgio Moroder was heavily influenced by Piero Umiliani.
Yeah, I chose it very specifically for the composition of our theme song, just because I fucking love it. John Carpenter loves it, and it's just the shit. I totally understand why he's in love with it. It has an amazing sound to it. It was made memorable for having an odd time signature, meaning that the number of beats in a measure is an odd number.
And he said, so it's 4/5, and he says his father taught him this. Or 5/4?
It's 5/4. So that means that there are 5 beats in a measure, and a beat is measured by a quarter note.
So he said his father bought him bongos when he was very young, and he never learned how to play them really. But he was like, but I remembered that. I remembered that it's a very unsettling time signature because it doesn't do what you think it's going to do.
No, it's wobbly. And that's the thing is the reason, and music theory is fascinating. I'm not really a musician. I took a semester of music theory when I first went to college. The reason, like, we have an innate sense of rhythm. It's just a piece of our consciousness. And 4/4 is symmetrical. It's even. It's very pleasing. That's why, you can dance to it. You can tap your feet to it. It does what you expect it to do.
Yes, and it's why a box step is a box.
Yeah, and so it sounds right for lack of a better term. Even fast songs performed in this time signature have like a kind of innately pleasing quality about them. But odd time signatures, they add or they remove a beat, and that puts you off balance. It keeps you.
Yeah, it's like adding or removing a stair.
Yeah.
If you're going up or down.
Right.
You think it's going to be there and it's not, and you stumble.
Yeah. And that's exactly what it is. And in this one with 5/4, it has a tendency to sound like it's moving, like it's always a little bit of ahead of you.
So the best way I have heard this particular song described, there was a ethnomusicologist on NPR years ago, and they were talking about this song specifically. It was around Halloween, believe it or not. And he said, what it is about this song. So there's that, the fact that there is that extra note where you're like, you don't know what to do with it. Your brain doesn't expect it. So you're thrown already. And he said, this is building and building and building, and it's unrelenting.
Yes.
You never think it's going to stop. And that makes your whole body tense.
Yeah. And this is a thing that, like, now, like, bearing this in mind, go and listen to other John Carpenter compositions, because this is sort of like his signature. Is it starts very simple, and then he adds a sort of level of rhythm under it, and then he adds a kind of dominating bassy texture under it, while there's this kind of frantic high register melody playing. And he does it for everything, even on his new stuff. And Firestarter he does it a lot.
Yeah,
it's
that new collection that came out like 2 weeks ago. They're still killing these old songs, like making them feel fresh and new.
Yeah,
because they just feel like nothing you've ever heard before. Because they are designed to be like something you don't expect.
Yeah, a big influence on this soundtrack was Bernard Herrmann inspires fucking everybody.
We would not have horror soundtracks were it not for Bernard Herrmann.
Yeah, so the Psycho theme.
It's like Bernard Herrmann, Bruno Nicolai, and Ennio Morricone. Without those, there would be no music in horror movies.
No, but the Psycho theme is in 3/4, to give you a sort of an idea. So, like, obviously he was like, okay, I can't do this in 4/4. It won't work. It has to have that fucking either one less or one extra.
Yeah, and Hitchcock didn't want that in his movie either. You know what that means?
He's a fucking asshole.
He's an asshole.
Yeah.
That guy was an idiot.
Fucking idiot. No vision whatsoever.
He's also all over this movie as well.
Yep.
Yeah, the score in this film there are so many moments while I'm watching it the last time around. There's one moment in particular that I had totally ignored. It is so innocuous in the movie that I am so taken by this time around, and it has to do with the music and like Cundy's camera work that I'm just like, this is the moment in the movie that is one of the most brilliant things I've ever seen.
Yeah. Yep. It is. Yeah. And this is, like I said, Swiss watch. Everything is just working in perfect concert. This movie would not be the movie it is without, if you removed one of these details, if it didn't have Dean Cundy, if it didn't have the soundtrack that it did, but it had everything else, like it would not work the way that it does. It wouldn't have the staying power.
I think a lot of that too is because John Carpenter was willing to listen when people said, "Hey, I have an idea."
Yeah.
And he would say, "Great, hit me with it. Let's do your thing."
Yeah. Yep. I love him for it. So once this movie was an undeniable hit, TV networks wanted it, and NBC ended up with it, with the rights for it for $3 million. But they had to cut
They said, "I have an idea. Let's make it stupid."
Yeah, they had to cut a lot of it for broadcast, which I think cut it down because the movie's like just a touch over 90 minutes. And so they had to cut about 10 minutes of violence. And so they're like, well, we can fill about 30 minutes of this with advertisements because they were going to do that anyways, but it left a gap of about 10 minutes. And so Carpenter in 1980 gets everybody together. Well, not everybody. He gets Donald Pleasance. He gets the kid who plays Child Michael. He gets PJ Souls, Annie, and Laurie. And they do a bunch of insert shots. And so these scenes include...
he gets them all together and he goes, hey guys, you guys know anything about quantum theory?
Because I got this idea.
You guys like weed?
So there's a scene where Loomis attends a hearing where a judge is ruling as red, remanding Michael to Smith's Grove. And we find out that his middle name is Audrey. Yep, just a little detail there. Michael Audrey.
It's just like
Myers.
Richard Gere's middle name is Tiffany.
The same
Michael Audrey Myers.
Yeah, the same scene explains why he was being moved in the first place, stating that he would face a jury trial as an adult on his 21st birthday, meaning I believe Michael's birthday is on Halloween. Kind of like how Jason's birthday is on Friday the 13th.
How convenient.
Loomis looks in on child Michael, same actor, clearly a few years on. There's also a scene where a modern-day Loomis checks in on a hospital following Michael's escape, finding his room trashed. We find out that Michael orchestrated this escape in a brutally efficient manner, typical of his character. And then to coincide with Halloween Halloween 2, for some stupid fucking reason, he has the word sister scratched on the inside of his room's door.
Yeah, they really tanked this shit.
That is the dumbest fucking detail. And to hear it told later on, John was like, I don't know, she's his sister? And they were like, fine.
No, it's like he was just eating lunch. And he was like, how about sister? And they were like, okay, cool. That'll work too, I guess. And it derails the entire fucking series.
Oh, yeah, that's
forever.
the thing. The legacy of these sequels is a legacy of basically writers constantly writing the next sequel's writer into a corner with some dumb fucking detail. Halloween 6 takes years to come out because everybody wants to write around that whole Man in Black angle. And
as much as everybody right now is like, oh no, it's totally a misunderstood classic. No, it's not. That movie is fucking terrible. It is badly written. It is badly shot. And it is badly acted.
I don't fuck with those sequels.
Not even Paul Rudd can save that. Not even Paul Rudd's handsome face can save this film.
No, good Paul Rudd. God damn it. Yeah, and also a detail about horror movies that I fucking love is that like major stars eventually, who eventually kind of come into a name brand, always start off in this. I found out that Adam Scott, one of his first roles is in one of the Hellraiser sequels. I was like, fucking seriously? Like back in the 90s? There's
That's
also
the barrel.
This was, I think it was the one in space.
Oh.
Yeah. And there's also a scene where Linda bursts into Laurie's house fretting about being followed by some guy. It's a fucking terrible scene. It has none of the sort of subtle energy of the original.
Way to undermine this entirely awesome thing you all did.
There's a reason why none of the official releases come with this footage, or they include.
Now it should be said he agreed to do all of this so we could get other awesome movies from him.
Yeah.
I mean, we get The Fog because of this.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of the stuff that John does that's not terribly good up to a point is usually he's trying to work his way out of really undesirable contract clauses.
Yeah, it's the Guillermo del Toro one for me, one for them thing.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's do it. Let's get into it.
Woo, okay.
Yeah, we open on those rad titles with the pumpkin and the anxious theme from Halloween. And then we get a card. Haddonfield, Illinois, Halloween night, 1963.
Super awesome.
Yep, and this is beautiful. It is a long tracking shot toward a house. We see a teenage girl and boy making out while someone, a surrogate for us viewers, watches them from the window.
So this whole scene, this opening scene takes an entire day to film.
Yeah.
And it is because they weren't super familiar with the Panaglide, but also because the way that they had set everything up, this is in a house. The whole movie is shot on location. And so the way it's set up, like I said, the Panaglide is attached, the Steadicam is attached to a person.
Yeah, basically what it is it's a camera balanced on a counterweight attached to this armature that is attached to a vest that you wear.
Yeah. And so it moves when you move. And people move. We don't think about the ways that we move.
Yeah, but the thing is it sort of dampens. Like if you try to do handheld without it, it's jerky and it's completely unwatchable. This sort of
feels more natural.
It smooths things out.
Hence the glide part of it. And so it feels like you're walking, you are the killer essentially. But he said, so Dean Cundey is saying if you move at all, he moved to the left or the right, you are going to see a shitload of people just scrambling all the time because every time. So he walks around the side of the house, looks in the window, and he sees his sister making out with her boyfriend. And he was like, as soon as he turns the camera away and starts to move again, that entire room lights up with people. They're resetting everything. They're
Yes.
relighting, they're redoing everything because they have to, because he's eventually
Right, because this is a one take shot, because it does we don't actually get a cut until after Michael is down on the street. This is all like one take.
No, you get 3 cuts upstairs.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But if he had moved in either direction, you would see everything. And so he's like, you have to be so careful moving with this thing, because if you move a little bit to the right or left, because they only dressed the scene that they needed to shoot, not the rest of the house. He's like, so going up the stairs, if you look to your right or to your, your right, he's like, you're going to see things that don't, like, it just looks like someone's house, but it looks like someone's house that is not connected to the room you just saw. Like, it's like any slight movement, you're going to fuck up your shots. He's like, everyone has to be so careful the way that they're moving, because they're constantly scrambling around the whole time, relighting, resetting, redoing everything.
Yeah.
And I had never really thought about it. I was like, that's kind of wild.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because they don't have much money. I mean, they've got like enough money to make this movie and shoot these shots maybe twice if you're lucky.
Yeah.
And then like just fucking keep going.
Yep. So they go upstairs to fool around, and we go around to the back of the house and into the house, and then a costume
45 seconds later,
a costumed arm enters the frame and picks up a knife from the kitchen and holds it in a stabby fashion. And then as the boy leaves, we sneak up.
Literally 45 seconds later.
Yeah, that was a pretty quick quickie. Because like he comes racing down the steps, putting his shirt on. She's like, "You're gonna call me, right?"
Thanks, gotta go. Bye.
Yep. You're gonna call me, right? And he's like, "Yeah, sure, babe." Like,
maybe go. What? Gotta go. Yep. My cab's here.
Yeah. So we sneak up the steps behind him, having picked up a clown mask from the living room. And so now the
Debra Hill's hands.
Yep, Debra Hill's hands. And so now the viewpoint switches to a view through the eyes of the clown mask, which is beautiful. And up the stairs we go to find teenage Judith Myers naked in her bedroom, brushing her hair.
Just tits out, combing her hair like Marsha Brady, just like 99, 100. Just, what is this moment?
Yeah. And she turns suddenly shouting, "Michael," which we heard the name before, where he's like, "Hey, like, are we alone?" And she's like, "Michael's around here somewhere." We don't know. We don't know. Let's imagine we don't know who Michael is. And then he begins to stab her repeatedly to death, breathing.
But the awesome part is you could hear the breathing.
Yes. So the breathing, again, this is a detail that I'd never really noticed, is when they really want to hit you with something, they do the breathing, like the breathing.
I believe they do that in Peeping Tom.
Ah, okay. It makes sense, because also we're supposed to be in the shot. We're supposed to be the killer. And so we're like inside the mask, and you've put a fucking Halloween mask on. You know what it's like, what it sounds like.
And so that stabbing scene, that's edited 3 shots. And what Dean Conde actually shows, he says where each cut is.
Oh, no shit.
See it.
So
because it's essentially every time it turns into a dark corner.
Right. So that's
where the cut is made.
It's like in Rope, where it's supposed to be like a single continuous shot, but they're constantly faking you out, because like a fucking film magazine holds like 9 minutes of footage. So he runs down the steps out into the streets. A car pulls up, and then two adults ask Michael before the mask is pulled off, and the perspective shifts to third person to reveal that Michael is a 6-year-old boy in a clown costume, with a blank expression, holding a bloody knife that killed his sister. And the camera floats away from the scene slowly on a long
awesome crane shot. And the crane shot, I think at the time he was like, I just wanted to do a really cool crane shot, but it really gives you that feeling of like, this is suburbia.
Yeah, because it sort of shows you the sort of the broader neighborhood, but also the way that it happens is kind of dreamy. So it's a little surreal. But yeah, in terms of like the chronology of how they shot this movie, they shot this scene last, because the house that the actual Myers house that they shot in, like the condition of that house is very much as you see it in the sort of like 1978 times where it's all fucked up and it's a wreck. And so after they did all the main movie, Tommy Lee Wallace and I think his girlfriend went in and just like painted it and patched it up. And
that would be his wife.
Oh,
Thank you very much.
And they patched it up and they put all of their like apartment furniture in the place to like make it look like it's a house.
No, the apartment furniture is in Laurie's house.
Oh, no kidding. All right.
Yeah.
Well,
so this house, but that's the reason why they were so worried about the way the shots look as they're going through the house, because if you turn in any direction, it looks like a rundown house. Yeah. It doesn't look like a lived-in home. So they had to be really careful about those tight shots.
Yep. The current location of the Myers house in South Pasadena is not the original location.
No, it looks like it's on a corner now.
It is. So it's basically it's sort of like a convergence of a number of streets and this like a rail line.
And they all lived in this neighborhood. Like that's part of the reason why they shot it there is most of them were living there.
Yeah. So 9 years after the movie premiered, it was on a plot of land that was set to be bulldozed into a hospital. And I saw this guy named David Margrave bought it at the last minute. As it was about to be like knocked over, and he paid $1 for it, but he was promising to have it moved, which he did. And so it currently rests about a block away from the actual Strode House location, near some train tracks. The city marked it off as historically significant because like the city, like South Pasadena is like where people go to shoot like nameless suburban American town. Cause like it does not
right next to Los Angeles.
Yeah. It's a little northeast of Los Angeles, but it does not look like California like the rest of like Burbank does. And even like Pasadena proper looks very Californian. This looks like a wicked neighborhood. Like it's the same reason why like a bunch of Nightmare on Elm Street was shot there and Pee Wee Herman's house.
I would move there. I think it looks like a fine neighborhood.
It's a wicked nice place. It's super expensive, but like
I live in Boston and most things look nicer than that.
Yeah. So, they landmarked it. You can go there. You can visit it if you're ever in South Pasadena. I recommend it. It's a lot of fun. Like the whole like Halloween tour that you can just kind of walk around, just like look up the locations. Like you can go there. I'll repost the photos to our stories about it. But like I did the thing. Like I even brought my mask out for it. The house looks way nicer today than it did in the movie, and the neighbors have all sorts of like Halloween related decorations up to it. Like one of the people in the back has there's a fence up, but like there's a tree that's high enough with some branches over it. And they've got like Michael Myers, like sitting in the tree. It's pretty cool. So now we cut to the title, Smith Grove, Illinois, 15 years later. And it is a stormy night the day before Halloween. And Dr. Loomis and a nurse drive up to the sanitarium to transfer Michael to a legal hearing of some sort. Dr. Loomis refers to Michael as it, which disturbs the nurse. Mm-hmm. When they get to the hospital, they find the patients all kind of like wandering around.
And she says, since when do they let them wander around like that? It's like, bitch, you just yelled at him about this.
But yeah, they're just like, it's storming out and they're just wandering around like it's fucking bedlam.
Like it's the SPCA. They're all just kind of out there in their hospital gowns.
It's the way that it's lit is a little eerie because you only see them from like the shoulders down. It's pretty cool. It's like these people.
Yeah, it has a real Meanwhile in Bedlam feel to it.
Yeah. So Loomis gets out to open the gate, and a patient climbs over the car and attacks the nurse, causing her.
In that fantastic sting. If you're watching, if you're paying close attention, so he climbs up on the roof there, of the car.
Yep.
And he reaches down to grab her, and she kind of clambers back to the other side of the car, and then his hand comes down and smashes the window. If you're paying close enough attention, you can see he has a wrench in his hand.
Oh no shit! Because I always wonder, because it looks like he just like smacks the window and it breaks.
Well, and that's what he's supposed to do, but he can't. You can't break a car window like that with your hand.
Yeah.
And so he has to. They have a wrench. You can see it sort of in his hand, and that's what smashes the window.
Gotcha. Because this I'll say, like we've done movies in the series where the 4K treatment, like the UHD treatment, does no favors to these movies. Not in this case. Like the Scream Factory Halloween release is the one that I did, and it is fucking beautiful.
It diminishes certain scenes, but for the most part, I think it really does enhance the movie.
Yeah. It's mostly also Dean Cundy played a very he was very close to the restorations and the sort of the scanning, and so like the way that they treat the darkness and like the blue hues and the nighttime shots in it, like
there's one scene they couldn't get right, and we'll get there eventually because it is a key scene in the film. But other than that, yeah, they do a really good job.
Yeah, but eventually she flees the car, and then Michael takes off with it. To which, this is the part where everybody's like, he's been in this hospital his whole life. How did he know how to drive a car? There's a scene like right after this where the doctor is like, he doesn't even know how to drive a car. And Loomis is like, well, he did great the other night.
Doing a very good job the other night. I think it's kind of great that they're just like, look, you got to just go with it. Because it's going to happen a bunch more times. Just shut up and watch the movie.
Yeah.
You'll be better off if you don't ask questions.
Yeah. The next day in Haddonfield, teenage Laurie Strode is on the way to school, and she has to stop.
So when she jumps out of the house there, comes bounding down from the house. You know what I always hated about this house is that the boards, like the siding on the garage, are the exact same as the siding on the house.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, that is the tackiest looking shit I've ever seen. But that is John Carpenter's car in the driveway.
Yeah. Yeah, it does not look like that today. It's a much more tasteful presentation on that.
So one of the things that Gene Conde says about all this whole, pretty much this, all the neighborhood shit that happens from here on out, he was like, we were constantly fighting to keep palm trees out of the shot.
Yeah, they just cannot help it. The sort of the foliage, the trees, and all that stuff around South Pasadena, they're enough to sort of pass as regular trees, but there are a couple of shots of just like long streets where just off in the distance are tall ass palm trees.
Yeah, he's like, eventually they were like, there were certain things we just couldn't keep it out.
Yeah, but I mean, they do a good job, and it wasn't until it was actually pointed out to me that I started to notice it. Like, it's one of those things that I just didn't give a shit, and like, it's not prominent, so unless you're paying attention, you're probably not going to notice it.
I'm going to guess that this was probably shot earlier on in their schedule, because the way that Laurie is styled in these early moments is like, this is real, like, I don't know how to describe it. It's got like a real kind of Girl Scout goody vibe to it that like they kind of lose a little bit as she goes on, which is good because I don't like the fact that they're like, here's the Girl Scout, and it's like, oh, Jesus Christ.
It's
a little on the nose.
Yeah, these are the pleated skirt and the kind of like the thick,
and the fucking
thick
stockings,
tights.
like, oh God.
Yeah, but yeah. So she has to drop off some keys for her father to the Myers house. He's the realtor selling it. And then
you can't go in there. It's a boogeyman lives in there.
Yeah. So on the way, she meets up with Tommy Doyle, who is an 8-year-old. I
want to say is the weakest link in this movie.
He's an 8-year-old with a 40-year-old's face.
Yeah. This. He's like, remember those? What were they called? The Boglins? Like, you get them on.
Yes.
Yep. Get them. I'm being unkind right now, but this kid he really brings nothing to the movie.
I like their chemistry, but I'll to Rob Zombie's credit, and also the David Gordon Green, the babysitter kids got way better energy.
Oh yeah, I told you the Rob Zombie one. I think that kid's fucking best part of that movie.
Yeah. But I do like Tommy. And we'll get to it. I love Lindsay. Yeah. So Laurie drops off the keys. When they get there, we find that someone is already waiting inside, and they watch her walk away from the sidewalk as she leaves. And this is that scene that he was talking about earlier, where it's just Michael enters the frame from the right, and it's just his shoulders to, like, his waist. You don't see his face, but like the way the camera moves is you get a couple of little glimpses, like something's up with his head, like they go out of their way to really hide, or not hide, but obscure the fact that he's wearing a mask.
Well, and that's one of the things that's really great about this is that they're constantly on top of each other in this movie. Like it's a lot of wide open space.
Yeah. And
yet you were tight shots on everybody. Like when he's doing those over the shoulder shots, he's like literally up against him.
Yeah. Yeah. And and we'll see it in others. Like there's a lot of like shots from the back seat of a car. And yeah, that had to be tight because the camera's not small, and so it was always Debra Hill.
You just put a tiny, awesome lady in the back. Yep. And it's cool. Get your shot.
Yep. So at school, Laurie looks out the window to see a man behind a station wagon.
Well, the worst, most boring teacher in the world drones on in front of the fucking class. You ever heard that podcast Sleep With Me?
No.
It's this guy, I can't remember his name. It's kind of funny, but it's to help people go to sleep. And he has a real droney voice, and he does shit where he's just like, I'm going to read to you, like the HBO guide from 1987. He just reads it. And that is what the teacher sounds like, where she's just like, and then this thing happened. Yep. And now what does he say about fate? I'm like, Jesus, I'm surprised they're not all fucking staring out the window at him.
Oh, I know. Yeah. So this marks the beginning of Carpenter teasing us with the mask, because we don't get a good look at the shape for some time. And for most of the movie, up to the point where Annie is killed, Michael's appearance is always obscured in some way. So in this particular shot, he appears like a regular person, but he's far enough away that you can't really tell what he looks like, but there's something about him that's not quite right. And that's that mask doing all the work, because... And
this is what I said to you last night, where I had to keep reminding myself that that Halloween wasn't a series.
Yeah.
There was no Halloween yet. So every time even when they bump into him, like directly into him, it's just a guy wearing a mask on Halloween. So even though he may look a little, I don't know, off,
yeah,
it's just someone wearing a costume on Halloween, which is not inappropriate.
Yeah.
So he's vaguely menacing just because he's there and you can't really make out what he is. But that's why he's menacing. Otherwise, it's just a dude in a costume.
That's the thing. And it's also because of what comes after this movie, it is hard to imagine what it must have been like for people who went to see this movie for the first time, not really knowing what to expect. And then, because by the time that we caught up to it, there'd been like fucking 3 sequels, and he was as much as like a recognizable killer as like Jason or Freddy. So like the mystique was gone for us. It was just a foregone conclusion that it's a guy wearing a mask. But like, I wonder how much of the effect of this movie and its popularity was based on the fact that like, if you had never seen this before, if you did not know going in that it's a guy wearing a mask, like what was your perception of a shot like this, where he's just a figure in the distance?
Right. And he's not scary because he's Michael Myers. He's scary because he's always in these shots.
Yeah.
Somewhere in there. He's like fucking creepy Waldo. Like either the car is in there, or he's in there. Like he's just constantly there. Yeah. That's what makes him menacing. And you don't know why.
I had only just recently noticed in a bunch of shots that like there are parts where just the station wagon drives by. Yep. Yeah, like he's like, that's the thing. He's always there, which is kind of why like the beginning of the movie like is not as slow as it could have been. Like this is still a pretty snappy movie in spite of the fact that it's just like a day in the life of some teenagers. And it's just,
but that's what makes it feel so menacing. Like I can't think of a movie that I think is actually scary. I just don't find films scary,
right?
But I find this type of thing, this building tension and this building dread, and this is that old kind of Hitchcockian approach to film where it's like there's nothing confrontational about it. I mean, eventually the movie does get confrontational, but there's really not much confrontational about it. It's this building feeling that something is wrong, but you don't know what it is.
Yeah.
I mean, at one point he is a little bit sort of like she looks down and there he is, and that's a little bit weird. But otherwise, it's just the fact that there's this guy who just seems to be there all the time, and you don't really know why.
Yeah, and his presence evolves over the course of the movie, because like right now he's across a field on the other side of a street, but like every time that they sort of tease him, he's a little closer and he's a little closer until he's right there in the back seat of Annie's car. So it's God, it's so fucking great. And I know that,
and these are those things that make this movie so fucking brilliant. It's like, it's not the big set pieces.
No.
It's this building dread, these little tiny moments where you're just a little bit thrown every single time. And it's like, oh, that's weird.
Yeah.
But like, how many times, like, I live in a neighborhood, I see the same fucking people everywhere I go. I don't think much about it, but if one of them was wearing a mask, I'd be like, oh, who's that weird guy?
Yeah. And then
keeping on, I guess.
Yeah, the thing about it also that like really is so impressive to me is that it's not accidental. These were all deliberate production design, like production decisions. Like, we're going to do it this way because it's going to have the effect that we intend it to. And in the end, it fucking works out that way. Like, they're taking kind of a leap here.
And this is also, I think, the benefit of not shooting chronologically too, because you can go back and you can make those changes without sacrificing lots of film.
Yeah. The editing also works pretty heavily.
And I think Tommy Lee Wallace did the editing too.
Yeah, with somebody else, but I believe Tommy Lee Wallace did the bulk of the editing. So yeah,
oh yeah, he definitely did, because he said he and the guy, they spent so much time doing the editing that the whole time they both ended up perfecting their Donald Pleasance impression.
Yeah. So Laurie's attention is briefly drawn away when she looks back to the car. The car and the stalker are gone.
And she comes to them, she's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, ma'am. What, you asked a question about Moliere?" Yeah. Sure. And then she bangs out some fucking snappy answer.
Yep. Later on, she's gonna say she can't get a date because boys think she's too smart.
Yeah, that's because boys are stupid.
Yeah. So yeah, that's it. The way that Michael lurks is just awesome to me. There's nothing overtly threatening about him. He's just there, but he's motionless.
And he's not giant. He's just a fucking dude.
Yeah.
He's not, what's his face from the Rob Zombie one, who's like 8 feet tall.
Yeah.
Wearing some torn up mask. He's just a guy in a mask, and he's just a fairly standard sized dude.
I'm going to say this. People in this movie could stand to be a little bit more on the defense about this guy lurking around fucking Haddonfield.
But that's the thing. That's what I was saying before. I guess she notices it. That's why she's kind of ready when shit does hit the fan. The rest of them are sort of like, yeah, you're crazy.
Yeah.
He probably just wants to fuck you. On with the show.
Yep. That's the 70s.
Well, it's true. Throw in a waterbed. That's definitely the 70s.
Yeah. No waterbeds in this movie, unfortunately. A little later on, bullies fuck with Tommy at school, giving him shit about the boogeyman.
This dud again.
Yep. And as they run, one of them runs straight up into the Shape, who is now talking.
In the loudest, sharpest sting you've ever heard.
Oh, yeah, it hurts. But now the Shape is stalking Tommy. And again,
and Tommy doesn't seem to notice that there's just this fucking creepy dude like rolling by next to him.
Right.
Also, you might notice that the window on the car is no longer broken.
That's right. But like, this is another one of those awesome things where Tommy just like runs down the fucking field, and the Shape like follows him on the sidewalk.
I mean, this is why every parent in the 80s was obsessed with kidnapping, except for, I guess, ours. They didn't seem all that interested.
Nope. I was told not
to. We're like, hey, we've got 3. Who cares if they take one?
We lose one.
Take the youngest one. He's loud and obnoxious.
Yep.
That's just for everyone's benefit. That's me. I'm the youngest one.
Yeah. So again, we catch a little glimpse of the mask, but not enough to know that it's even a mask. Just enough to tell you that something is very wrong.
Yeah, and we're going to come back to this mask thing in a little bit, because I have got a big old point to make about something.
Yeah. But also, as if the threatening piano melody wasn't enough to clue you in.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, out in Illinois wine country, Loomis discovers a clue at the scene of what appears to be an abandoned truck. But
my question is, what are the odds that he stops at the exact service station?
No, the confluence of events here is the best, because here's what happens. He sees the truck, and it's like for like a mechanic, and it's all open. The door's left open. And what Loomis does is he looks down on the ground and he finds a little matchbook for a place called the Rabbit in Red Lounge. And
which is a great bit of continuity.
Yeah. And this
is... because that is which the nurse lights her cigarette with in the car.
So that's how he knows that he's on the right track. But what he doesn't notice is the body of the dead fucking...
But he does grab the hospital gown that is in the bushes, which I like to think that Michael Myers got out of that car and he just took this hospital gown off like with a flourish. Like it's strewn about.
Oh, yeah. One-handed, just whipped it off.
Yeah.
He kills Big Joe Grizzly, and then he takes his coveralls and he gets back into the station wagon. But if Loomis had just taken 5 more steps.
Now just step one foot in the front of you. And there he is, laid out in the bushes.
Yeah, but
nude.
He's yeah, because Michael was bare ass naked for a few minutes there. But yeah, the matchbook is all he needs, so off to Haddonfield he goes. Lori is now walking home from school with her friends Annie and Linda.
That's my girl Annie.
Yep. Oh God, she's definitely my favorite. Definitely.
Okay, so we're gonna take a break here for a minute because I want to talk about these ladies. Queens upon queens. Love all three of them. Now, I think there's something really interesting about a horror movie that at this point is iconic, that is built around three young women. And that's why I think there's that obvious gravitation towards the notion of misogyny that is sort of inherent in these movies. Because this whole movie, they are the anchor of this film. But there's nothing about, like, they're so fucking natural in this movie. So Annie is played by Nancy Kyes, who for some reason is called Nancy Loomis.
Yeah.
I don't really understand why, but she does it in subsequent movies. She plays the same character in 5 different movies. And she's only really in about 5 movies. She is Tommy Lee Wallace's wife at the time. And I think that might be why she's in these movies. Because she stopped acting.
Huh.
So she is in Assault on Precinct 13, then this, then she is in The Fog, then she's in Halloween 3.
Who is she?
She's in a couple other
Who is
things.
she in The Fog?
She's Janet Leigh's assistant.
Oh, shit.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. All right.
And she's fucking incredible in that.
Yeah.
She's the sassy one. She's the sort of snotty one. Now, I think there's something really interesting because I don't know how you feel about them, but I think a lot of people, this whole franchise gets built around Michael Myers. And it's fine. Michael Myers, the whole point of Michael Myers is that there's nothing there.
Yeah.
Like he's just basically just a shape.
That is, I believe that vacancy is what is ultimately his appeal, because he seems to have a very specific goal, but his motivations are unclear, and it just makes people want to answer questions, because I do the same thing. I've gamed out Michael Myers in my head a whole bunch of times, and nothing ever satisfactory comes along. But it is very easy to forget that there's a whole bunch of other compelling characters in these movies.
But I think that is a very important difference for what I'm about to say, because I don't remember seeing this much while I was growing up. I mean, I know I did. I've seen it a million fucking times. I can tell you what I see when I watch it now. And I don't give a fuck about Michael Myers. I don't think it's an interesting character at all. I do think these characters are fascinating. And I think there's something to the idea of gay men being drawn to characters like these. Because if you watch, if you read anything about these, it's like, well, Annie's sort of the snotty, shitty one. Like, she's kind of mean. And PJ Soul's character, Linda, she's sort of like, she's peppy and a little obnoxious. But it's like, I love all of them, especially Annie. And I feel like gay men are drawn to these characters.
You also love Judy in Sleepaway Camp.
I do. Yep. Because I think, and I'm just going to make a big generalization here, and I don't know how true this is for younger people, but for a lot of gay men, specifically in the 70s and 80s and 90s, you didn't get to be who you were. Even if you were openly gay, you still had to not be who you really were. You had to really tamp it down. Characters like this, they were exactly who they wanted to be. So Annie is brash and aggressive. Is she a little bit mean? Yeah, she's kind of shitty, but you know what? So are most teenagers.
Yeah.
Teenagers are awful people.
Sure.
And so I think that that's why gay men are drawn to characters like Judy, like Annie. And that's why it's really interesting to hear you say, I've thought a lot about Michael Myers. I have not. I don't give a fuck about Michael Myers. I think he's boring. I don't give a shit. Every time they cut to him or Loomis, I'm like, get back to them. I don't give a fuck about these characters. And that's why it really upsets me when it's like, oh, well, they're disposable. They're absolutely not disposable.
They are
Annie's
vital.
death is the worst part of this fucking movie.
They are vital pieces of this puzzle. Again, they're a very big piece of why this movie works the way that it does.
When they cut to Donald Pleasance, I don't give a shit about Donald Pleasance's character.
There were a couple of times where oh shit, we're back at the Myers house. I'm like, fuck this. At least here comes Sheriff Brackett. Yeah, for sure. They are the brightest moments of the movie. And when they die,
the way they're written is so good.
Yep, when they die, it sucks. Like, it really does, because the deaths in this movie are not like the deaths in other slasher movies for me. Like, at certain points, it's like, okay, well, I know all these people are gonna get fucking killed, but like when they do, none of them are developed in any sort of way that makes me go, oh, that sucks. But in this one, yeah, when Annie gets killed, dude, that blows. When fucking Linda gets killed, it's like, fuck, man. Even though you know they're going to die.
Awesome characters.
Yeah.
But you're supposed to feel bad when they die because you really like them. But there's nothing about them versus Laurie that I think is any different. They're basically the same.
Yeah.
They're just different variations of people. That's how friend groups evolve. People have different roles, and just like they do in families. People have different roles. And that is what's happening in this friend group. Annie is sort of the brash one who's a little bit needly and prickly, and Linda is sort of peppy and cute and like you like her, but they're both a little spunky. And Laurie's sort of like the a little bit reserved and quiet and nerdy, but they're basically all the same. They're on a level playing field. It's not like, oh, she's virtuous. There's nothing more virtuous about any of that. And if anything, I think it's pretty misogynistic to say that, to be like, oh, she's slutty, that's why she has to die. That's a shitty thing to say.
Yeah. And
because none of them are slutty. None of this reads like Friday the 13th and its various sequels.
Right.
They read like teenagers who are interested in sex, like most teenagers are.
Yeah. I mean, it's consistent with my experience, I'm
going to fight everybody about this.
But yeah, it's
wait till we get to Black Christmas. I'm going to do this times 5.
Again, the secret sauce, everybody knows this, though. I'm not saying anything fucking new here. But all of the Laurie, Annie, Linda dialogue was written by Debra. So there was just, she was, I can't remember how old Jamie Lee Curtis was.
They're not that much older. So I think Jamie Lee Curtis, most of them, they're about 18, 19.
Yeah. And I think
maybe 20.
I think Debra was 25 or 20.
She's like 25.
Yeah.
So they're not much older.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, she's a little
older. They don't really read teenage exactly, but for the most part.
Teenage enough, You
get the vibe. They're teenage adjacent.
Yeah. So she turns quick, having forgotten her chemistry book, and then she sees the car from before.
Oh, she says, because one of them was, I think it's Annie's, she's going on about something, and she's like, and a place to, and then Laurie goes, oh shit. And she turns to her and goes, I have a place for that.
Yes. Yeah. They see the car from before, and again, we can't see inside of the car because of the shadows, but we catch a glimpse of the driver, and this is when Linda calls out to him. Or is it?
Well, she says first. Laurie says, "Oh, is that?" Or I think Linda says, "Oh, is it Devon Graham or something?"
Yeah.
And they cut to Laurie's face, and she looks a little bit troubled, and she's like, "No, I don't think so." Yeah. And she has. It's that sort of like disquieting moment where you're like, something about this is enough to upset her, but her friends clearly don't notice that.
Right, because they just keep fucking with him.
And because she shouts, "Hey, jerk,
speed kills."
And she says it despite the fact that he is going 15 miles an hour.
Yeah. So we learn that the plan for tonight is that Annie will be watching Lindsay Wallace while Laurie watches Tommy Doyle. Linda will be going over to the Wallace place to fuck her boyfriend Bob, I guess. Hell of a plan.
That's the plan.
They've been planning it for weeks. And so, also, PJ Souls is wearing platform sandals that are taller than Gene Simmons' boots. They are something. So, as she leaves, Laurie looks ahead to see the shape again in the famous hedge scene.
Well, because first he stomps on the brake, and the car comes to like an abrupt stop when she yells.
Yeah, and then
then it just keeps going.
And he takes off. The head again,
because he's like, I just want you to know that I know that you know I'm here.
Yeah.
And I'm a little upset with you right now.
Because you came to my house.
For yelling rude things at me and for entering my home.
Yeah. He's partially obscured by the bushes.
Which is probably one of the greatest, most iconic moments in horror history.
This movie has a couple of shots that are fucking iconic. This is one of them. And it's just, I don't know what it is. But again, it's that thing I was talking about earlier where he's a little closer now, and you can tell he's wearing something on his head, but it looks like a fucking regular human face. Like it's
also his position too, with the way he's standing. He's standing very like sort of his shoulders are squared. He's very upright.
It's an aggressive.
He's in a very weird place because he's half obscured by a hedge.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, why are you standing in someone's lawn?
Yep.
But also kind of on the sidewalk, and you're clearly looking at us in a very it's very menacing.
He strikes a very aggressive pose.
But again, she's the only one who sees
Yeah,
it.
by the time Annie looks up, he's gone. And this is the part where like Annie goes up and she's like, "Oh, he'd like to talk to you. He wants to ask
She
you
says,
out."
"Lori, dear, he wants to take you out tonight."
Yep.
God, I love her.
Yep. But yeah, shape in the distance, that fucking face, eerie as hell. Annie's got balls of steel to approach the dude behind the bush, even after.
Yeah, because she just goes right in for it.
Yep. But yeah, she's a crazy lady. So still distracted, Lori bumps right into Annie's dad, Haddonfield's Sheriff Brackett, who informs her.
Now, I'm gonna say, is Charles Cyphers is Sheriff Brackett? Is he supposed to be like a red herring? Because he reads real creepy in this movie.
I don't know.
He's a very close talker.
Well, okay.
And
she runs into him right after the scene with the hedge, so maybe? Because Hitchcock also did that, where there was always
he also has a real Paul Lynde vibe.
He does. Yep. He's definitely a little bit more butch.
Yeah, it's a lot like a, "Hey, Laurie, what are you doing here?"
Everybody's entitled to one good scare. So yeah, back in her room, she looks out the window. Lori, that is.
She has the nipple hat on the wall.
She catches.
Which I will, to David Gordon Green's credit, they do bring the nipple hat back in the.
Yeah, a thing about these, like doing the sort of revival movies before we did this one, I was able to really sort of appreciate their eye for detail, because I would probably do the same shit too if I was like remaking Halloween. I would throw in all the shit, the nerdy little detail bullshit that like only me and like everybody who actually flies in for the Halloween 45 convention, you know?
And that's as generous as I'm going to be with David Gordon Green.
Yeah.
And all the furniture in this room, this is.
Okay. So yeah,
Tommy Lee Walsh.
I thought that it was that Tommy had dressed up the Myers house.
And I wondered to myself, this is the furniture from the bedroom you share with your wife. Why do you and your wife sleep in a twin bed?
Hey, they're young. They're hungry.
They are. They got a nipple hat on the wall. They got a twin bed. That's all they have for their name.
Yep.
We can fucking that and $8 from Assault on Precinct 13.
Yeah, but that's all about to change. So yeah, she looks out the window, catch a glimpse of the shape as he stares at her from the backyard.
And that is an awesome moment in history.
Yep. That's another one of those fucking iconic shots. Fucking great.
Because now you know it's not just random, that he's following her.
He's zeroed in on her, seemingly just because she went to his house. That's probably it. That's like the reason is.
Yeah, that's the only. But so that's the whole point of this. What makes this film frightening is that this movie is essentially about anonymous violence.
Yeah. So this is the thing is, this is why I asked you this earlier, because this movie falls in a spot where a shitload of serial killers are starting to get caught. But I asked you if you had a sense of like what the public knowledge of serial killers was at the time, because the media wasn't quite as consolidated as it is now. So like you probably did you only know about the Son of Sam killer if you were a New Yorker, or did you only know?
No, not necessarily. No, you would know. So it depends on the story, but a lot of them were. If they were big enough, Son of Sam would have been big enough to show up in papers. It would have been on the wires. It would have been syndicated.
Yeah.
It's not that they didn't know about them. It's that they didn't really. The answer to the question is complicated, and people don't like complicated answers.
Yeah.
And so it's like, well, this person's killing 7 people, and they're like, well, obviously he's a degenerate sicko. Move on.
Yeah. Because this is the same time as like. The behavioral analysis unit is starting to come up. John Douglas is starting to sort of like build. I don't know how people feel about forensic psychology. I don't know where to stand on it, but his book Mindhunter is fascinating as fuck.
I mean, they were probably right a little bit more often than they were wrong.
Yeah. But
I mean, there's a lot to it, but it's that kind of thing where it's like, well, we don't want complicated answers to things.
Right. And it doesn't get much more complicated than a person who murders another person because they like to do it, or they
So I think what I
Yeah.
What I told you was this was the first time that people are starting to really understand that there are people out there who are killing for reasons that are not like personal gain.
Yeah.
It's not a rage killing. It's not robbery. It's not for an inheritance. They're doing it for a particular reason that is psychological. That's about as far as most people could go with it.
Yeah, because
that's about as far as people can go with it now. It's just not something people want to think about.
Right, because I can't remember. I don't pay that close attention to the whole serial killer thing, but Edmund Kemper's story is very close to this in the sense that like he murdered his grandparents when he was a kid for the fuck of it. And then he did a little time in a mental hospital and then he got out and then he fucking...
And so this is where the babysitter killer thing actually comes from. This is the story he gets from Bob Clark that he kind of uses a little bit because the basis of the Black Christmas story, when we get there, I'll tell you the actual story, but it's basically a kid who murders his parents one night in Canada and just out of nowhere with a baseball bat, he just kills them. And that's it. And everyone was like, wait, I don't understand what happened. And the answer was, we don't know.
Yeah.
So they stick him in an institution and then eventually they have to let him out because, it's not only is it Canada, but also it's an institution. So you can't keep him locked up forever. And he gets out and that's it. He just lives the rest of his life. That's fine. And I'm sure there's a lot more. There is a reason why he killed his parents with a baseball bat, but they never really reported on any of
It's
that.
very specific to him.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so it's this idea of it's late 70s. It's this idea of anonymous violence is what they called stranger killings. That these things are exceedingly rare. Like this type of violence doesn't happen, but the thought of it is absolutely terrifying. It's like a plane crash. Plane crashes are very rare. They don't happen very often, but when they do, they're absolutely terrifying because there's no particular reason to them. There's no, you can say, well, if I do this, this, and this, I won't be killed by someone. If I do all these things, I won't die in a plane crash. You cannot control someone who might just come marauding into your town one day and decide you're the one he's going to kill for no particular reason. It doesn't happen often, but when it does, there's nothing you can do to stop it. And because it was so prominent at the time, it just seemed to pop up a lot. The fact that they're now taking it out of the cities and out like off of like college campuses, they're putting it in these kind of anonymous suburbs. It's that, everything is fine. Everything's supposed to be safe here. And all of a sudden it's not anymore. And it's this like I think Carpenter takes it a little bit further. And, you listen to the that podcast series that Amy Nicholson did.
Yeah, Halloween Unmasked, by the way. I used that as a significant source of information on the making of this movie.
Carpenter grows up. At first, they didn't live in Kentucky. They get relocated there because of his father's job. And he was being transplanted to the South was very shocking for him because he had never seen such sort of virulent, open racism.
Yeah.
And he didn't quite get it. Like the fact that people would make jokes about like hurting black people or killing black people. And he was shocked by that. Like he didn't understand. I think his girlfriend at the time, her grandfather or her father was involved in something like that. He was like, I don't understand. Why are they doing this?
The story is extremely dark in that a black man passed in front of her grandfather's car. Like he was walking across the street and her grandfather sped up, ran him over, and then stopped at a payphone to tell the cops to come and get his body, and no consequences were ever leveled against him. And he was just like, what the fuck was that?
And that's what we get into later, like when she's trying to get people to help her. And
because there is a scene where she goes up to a house and is slamming on the door, and they turn the light on, and they look out the window, and they're like, nope, not dealing with that right now, and they shut the light out.
And this is very much like the way people at the time sort of understood the sort of Kitty Genevieve's story about like, well, all these people knew it was happening. And now we know that that's not actually true. It's not really what happened. The people, they knew it was happening. They just didn't really quite know where it was happening. But it's that idea that like, nobody will help you. And the violence will just strike, and there's no reason for it. It is this blind hatred and like kind of it's this concept of evil that it just breezes into town. And that's why this movie ends the way that it ends, because it blows into town, it causes all this mayhem, and then it just sort of blows out of town.
Goes away. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so that's sort of like it's all, and that's why I was saying earlier, like we can't discount like Clover's argument that like, well, these aspects of culture and this misogynist, that's sort of like the misogyny that's inherent in culture, we can't just dismiss it because it's like all of these things are feeding this story, especially the kind of contemporary fears of the time that like you are a white person in suburbia, you moved there to get away from all this, and even then it can still follow you here, and there's absolutely nothing you can do to stop it.
Oh, yeah.
And there's nobody that can help.
Certainly, it's in a form that you could never have foreseen.
Right.
Yeah. So later, Annie picks up Laurie for their respective babysitting gigs, and Annie is listening to the Coupe de Villes, which is Carpenter's band formed with Tommy Lee Wallace and Nick Castle.
It's the only song that doesn't get credited in the final credits.
Yeah, yeah. Eventually, they show up in The Boy Who Could Fly, and then they're
in that. Then they're in Big Trouble.
Big Trouble in Little China, and you can look up the video for Big Trouble in Little China, and it is one of the most embarrassing things
because that got some MTV play.
Yeah. It's a fucking cringy little video.
Now I'm going to tell you this whole scene, this whole car scene. This is my favorite part of the movie.
Really? What? I do. Is this where she talks? No. Because she talks about Ben Tramer later, right? Or is this?
The car part gets interrupted in the middle where they cut away and they go to a different part of the story, but then they come back.
Right. Because the Ben Tramer thing is really, really funny because it's just this throwaway little detail that comes back several years later in Halloween 2. And it's just
in the best way.
In the best way. But yeah, so they're listening to the Coupe de Villes, and then later they listen to Don't Fear the Reaper by Blue Oyster Cult, the movie's only licensed piece of music, which
while they're smoking weed.
Yep, while they're smoking weed. As you found out, this is a detail that I just recently realized.
I don't know how you missed it. It's like it's pretty obvious.
So
in the scene.
This is
just a great song.
After you were like, "What the fuck? You're just noticing this?" It occurred to me like I have never really had an eye for details. Usually, when I'm watching a movie, I become kind of fixated on a particular thing, and it's usually the dialogue. And in that capacity, I tend to let things that are happening in the margins just drift away because I'm just not paying attention to them. The fact that like listening to film music it's not recent for me because I've been doing it for fucking decades, but I went without noticing film music as a piece of a movie for way longer than I did, actively listening to it. Like it's just that sort of thing is just not something I paid attention to. And so like when I was like, oh shit, it's Don't Fear the Reaper. I fucking love that song. No wonder Rob Zombie, brings it back so prominently in his movies. But yeah. Also I believe that record was brand new at the time. So like
might have been.
Yeah.
I mean, the fucking Blue Oyster Cult, they could have like packed it up after that one song. The number of times that's been used in movies.
It's a hell of a song. They got better songs.
Great song. It is dark as hell.
Yeah. It's all about dying willingly. They got better songs, but it's a hell of a track. So yeah, John Carpenter had the prescience to recognize a hit for it. But yeah, as you said, smoke a little weed on the way to work.
And this is, again, I like this because Annie is still sort of needling Laurie. She's still kind of fucking with her. But it's in that way that, like, if you have a group of friends, which most teenagers do, you've got that one that's just kind of fucking with everybody all the time. Yeah. It's like being shitty.
Just busting chops.
But it's essential to a moment that comes a little bit later that I think this is the moment I watched the last time I watched, and I was like, holy shit, this is the most incredible part of this movie. But we will get there in a moment.
Yeah. So meanwhile, Loomis goes to Haddonfield Cemetery to visit the Judith.
This is where it gets interrupted.
Yeah, he goes to see the Judith Myers gravesite for some reason.
Where I'm like, I don't care about that.
Why is
the movie not long enough?
Why is he even there? What is the fucking? I mean, I know it's just so that we can see that Michael took Judith's marker, but like, huh? I guess that's another one that we just kind of got to go with.
Yeah, because they spent a quarter of their budget on him. That's why he's there.
Yeah. Yeah. But also, this is a thing that like later. A thing that just plays into my head canon about Haddonfield is as they're going there, this kind of groundskeeper is also telling Loomis a story about another Haddonfield dude who just randomly murdered his family one night.
And that's, again, it's that idea of like suburbia, the kind of perfect bubble of suburbia is punctured every once in a while by violence.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that story is incidentally not real. If you Google it, it just comes up as being associated because he says the guy's name. I can't remember what it is.
Oh, right, yeah. But I mean, I figured it was just a fucking, it's just dialogue,
Yeah, like he kills his wife with a hammer one night or whatever.
Yeah.
But he does say his name. I looked it up. He's not real.
No. So Annie and Laurie are now being followed by the Shape in the station wagon, and they run into Annie's dad outside of a hardware store that had been broken
This is
into.
my actual favorite part.
That hardware store is like across the street from where the Myers house like now resides.
Now, here's my point about this. We have seen him in this mask for the last 45 minutes of this movie,
Yep.
which takes probably hours.
So has that...
Why is the alarm still going
Has that
off? That
alarm-
means the alarm in this store has been going off for several hours.
Yeah. So what we learn is that the hardware store has been broken into from Annie's dad. We learned that a Halloween mask, some rope, and a couple of...
All he took was some Halloween mask, rope, and a couple of knives. Yep, nothing weird about that.
Nothing weird about that. Loomis enters the frame.
Now, you're going to skip over my favorite line in this entire movie, and because it is just sort of an innocuous line where he's trying to say something to them, the alarm is going off, and she goes, and he shouts too, and her line delivery is so fucking brilliant.
Yep. So Loomis enters the frame, demands a little time from the sheriff as the Shape drives past in the station wagon. And so now we cut back to Annie and Laurie in the car. And
this is the part that I think is absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
So they're kind of pulling down the road, and there's this moment, and they're just kind of, it's just banter. They're just kind of talking. This is the Ben Tramer part.
Yeah.
Where she's talking about that. And there's a part where they both stop talking and they just kind of look at each other. And it's this prolonged look where they're kind of like, it's a little bit uncomfortable, I think, because it's so intimate. And you get the sense that, like, as much as Annie has been needling her this whole time, she kind of realizes, like, oh, this is something that actually is, like, it's easy for Annie or for Linda to, talk to guys or whatever. And it's that point where she's sort of like, I recognize that it's not as easy for you. And it's this moment of, like, incredible empathy and compassion that is shared just in this really brief moment. There's, like, prolonged look, and it's got the kind of, it's that, magic hour lighting. And then the car, they kind of pull away from the car, and you watch the car pull down the street, and it kind of takes a turn, and then it turns out of view, and then the theme music kicks in really hard. And this is the moment where everything in that scene signals to you everything is about to be different now.
Yes. So this is middle of the second act, like firmly we're about to take the turn.
I don't know why I found this scene so it's so incredibly effective, and it's so incredibly affecting. And I was just like, wow, that is absolutely brilliant. Just this, like, long stare as they kind of look at each other, and it's like, oh, right, they actually are really good friends. She does really care about her. That's just who she is.
Yeah.
And they just kind of have this really beautiful moment. And then it's kind of like, now, that's the last you're going to get of that, because the shit is about to hit the fan, and that's why the music kicks in.
This is childhood's end for sure.
Yeah.
Also, we keep saying it. In the event that you don't know what we're talking about, Ben Tramer is the name of this boy that Laurie has a crush on. Ben Tramer is the guy in part 2 who gets plowed over by the van.
Not only does he get shot, he also gets hit and slammed into by an ambulance and then bursts into flames.
It's such a fucked up detail, but I don't know. I love it. So yeah. So now they split up. They go their separate ways. So the Wallace house and the Doyle house are on the same road. They're basically up across the street. And these are basically the two locations that we're going to stick to for the rest of the movie. And so as they go their separate ways, Michael watches Annie, I think, go into the Wallace house as the Wallaces are leaving, and he's just kind of like hidden behind a tree. So now Loomis and Brackett visit the old Myers house, and they find that a dog has been butchered there recently.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And the sheriff says, could have been a skunk.
Could have been a skunk?
Bitch!
What?
Skunks do not eat dogs.
Yeah. And Michael's got a thing for dogs, because this is not the last dog that's going to get killed in this movie.
Debra Hill says they did that in order to convey how evil he was. It's like, I don't know if you needed to do that. The fact that he murders about 7 people in this movie, that tells me he's evil.
Yeah. Yep. So this is the part where Loomis delivers his, like, blackest eyes, the devil's eyes speech. And
I felt the whole time, I'm like, I can just fucking do without all these scenes.
Yeah. So here's the thing. Loomis
every time he's in the movie, it just feels superfluous. Like, I don't need this.
I know.
He's fine, I guess.
He's there because they needed a name on the poster. But Loomis gets a lot of shit for being a bad psychiatrist. And while I've never found the character to be terribly compelling, I think he's a bit of a Deus Ex for the ending of the movie.
Yeah.
I think that his conclusion about Michael is on point, and that the sequels are going to eventually bear this out.
Yeah, he is only there to deliver this monologue.
Yeah.
He just gets increasingly hysterical as the series goes on.
Yeah, you know what this is? This is Quint.
Yes.
In the 1,600 men went into the water. You know that this is the Halloween's version.
Black eyes, doll's eyes.
But Michael is he's not simply mentally ill, and I don't think a better doctor probably wouldn't have gotten through to him either. And so as we come to realize, Michael is just a killing machine.
This is what you were getting at, is like, it's this idea that there is nothing there. That this thing is just a monster.
That's all there is to it.
It lives to kill. That's all it wants to do. And if it acts as though it cares, it is only doing so in order to get close to kill you.
Yeah.
Like, that is all. Like, that's a very basic understanding of that type of personality. But like, the idea that existed, that there were people like that, that's what is just entering sort of cultural consciousness.
Yeah. One of the things I found out about, I think in that Halloween Unmasked podcast, is in the process of writing this, Carpenter read a book called The Mask of Sanity, which is, I think, where he took the metaphorical concept of the mask of sanity and sort of applied it to, Michael, in a sense that he's wearing a
He also said that he had gone to, like, when he was either in college or in high school.
That story too.
And I was like, this is a little questionable. I don't know that they would take students that weren't that did not have a justifiable reason to be there. I don't think they would just take them to a psychiatric hospital.
Let me tell you something. I worked in a psychiatric hospital for a little while. We were very careful about who was admitted into the place.
No, in order to get in, because I had to go there on a regular basis. Again, not as a patient, but just to get into places. It's like having to go into a prison, which is also, I used to have to go into prisons a lot. You do not walk into these places. Like, it is very difficult to get inside of them.
Yeah.
And so, like, the idea that they would just be like, sure, come on, kids, let me take you in. And like, the way he sort of describes it is like, it's like going into Bedlam. They're all drooling, and it's Chitticut Follies, and it's like, it's not quite like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, I certainly had experiences with clients who were a little Michael-like, but yeah, like his description of like somebody that he saw there was like, he looked evil, he wanted to kill me, and I'm like,
yeah, he's describing the shark in Jaws, and it's like, that's not what people are like when they're like this.
Yeah. But
that's sort of the base understanding that people had, was like, oh, they're these just sort of marauding beasts that like. They're incapable of talking, or they're just there to savagely rip you apart.
Yeah, like in the sense that in the future, the way that Michael is portrayed is like he just waits. Even in those insert scenes that Loomis that Carpenter shot with Loomis, is he keeps insisting that he's been waiting for 15 years to do this, just biding his time since he was 6 years old.
I fucking hate that monologue. Looking to tonight, looking past the wall, not seeing the wall. It's like, is you making this up?
Yeah.
Are you ad-libbing this?
Yep. And so
it's just the most clunky fucking dialogue. These are the moments that I think keep this movie from being as close to perfect as you can get.
Yeah. But so at Tommy's house, Laurie reads King Arthur to an unimpressed Tommy, who shows her his comic books.
Now he wants Laser Man, he wants
Tarantula Man. And Neutron Man.
Yep.
And then he asks her about the boogeyman. Meanwhile, the Shape watches Annie from the outside while she calls Laurie to tell her that Ben Tramer wants to take her to the dance. Too bad that'll never happen.
Nope.
While they're on the phone,
he is going to explode into flames in a few hours.
Yep. Tommy looks outside and he sees the Shape standing in the darkness at the Wallace house. Meanwhile, Annie gets some shit on her clothes. I think it's butter.
Annie spills an entire pan of butter on her shirt, so she has to get completely naked.
Yep. Has to change out of them, put them in the wash.
She's very thorough.
Yep. So this is where I become a humongous Lindsay Wallace fan, because she just wants to watch her horror.
She's pretty great.
She just wants to watch her horror movies. And most of her shots are just a picture of her in the dark staring at the television.
Now, we should say, when it comes to the two children, Kim Richards had been in a bunch of movies already. she was an experienced actor. She is now an experienced housewife.
Oh yeah, she's one of
housewife.
the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills.
I think I don't know if she still is, but like she's the one who's like the most legitimate of them all, I guess.
She's like
I know nothing about that.
She's
show.
like what is it? She's like Paris Hilton's aunt or something like that.
I think so. She seems like a decent person though. She's always been kind of I always thought she was a good child actor. She is in The Car, What Evil Drives. She is in Devil Dog, Hound of Hell.
Yep,
she's also in The Watcher. She's in The Watcher in the Woods.
No, she's
that might be her sister.
No.
Her sister's in Watcher in the Woods.
In Jesus, I know we're getting off track. The Watcher in the Woods, she was the Olympic skater. I can't remember what her name. She's also in
because her sister's in movies too.
Yeah, no, but she's in Witch Mountain. She's in the Witch Mountain movies. It's the girl who's in For Your Eyes Only, I think.
For British Eyes Only.
Yeah.
So that's why I think like Tommy's a real fucking dud in this movie. Lindsay's not, but Lindsay is also an actual actor, a child actor at the time. Oh, she also gets killed at the beginning of Assault on Precinct 13. That's what starts the whole thing off.
She's the girl with the ice cream.
Yeah.
So Tommy, So now, no, wait. I'm getting ahead of myself. The Wallace dog finds the shape outside, unfortunately.
So my question though is, before this happens, he pulls down like they have like macrame. It's the 70s.
Oh yeah,
they got a lot of macrame.
A lot of macrame everywhere.
And so he pulls one down. And every time I hear macrame, I think of polyester.
Well, that's a big part of polyester.
Yeah. So I don't know if he pulls it down on purpose, like it's a plant, like a hanging planter. I don't know if he pulls it down on purpose or if it's like he's excited in the moment and just sort of yanks it down.
Oh, I always thought that he just bumped into it.
No, because it's like that was always my assumption as well. But he's holding on to like a planter, and he kind of pulls too hard on it.
Maybe that's the thing. It's like
and that's why it crashes to the ground.
Yeah, but that's what alerts the dog, and the dog goes, because apparently Annie hates the dog.
Because there's that great line where she's on the phone. She's like, I'm about to get ripped apart by the family dog.
Yeah.
Every fucking line she delivers it's so snarky and awesome.
It's very funny. Meanwhile, Tommy and Lori watch The Thing. Very prescient, but also just because, Carpenter loves that movie.
It is a good film.
It's a great movie. And then Lori tells Tommy that the boogeyman can only come out on Halloween night.
What I love about that moment, though, is that they don't even make it past the title card of The Thing, and they both look so rapt. They are just like on the edge of the couch. It's like this movie has been on for 2 minutes.
That movie is
if that.
It's a hell of a title, and you can tell that he likes it so much because it's all in the fucking movie, and then he does it again when he makes his own version of it.
So these scenes, though, apparently there's one of the more interesting things that Dean Cundy says on the commentary is that Carpenter, when he agreed to do the movie, when they agreed on the budget, he said, okay, fine, but there are three things we absolutely have to have. One of them was they wanted to use the best lab in town for processing, which was MGM. Yep. They said fine. They wanted the best sound studio, which was Sam Goldwyn's studio. And he said that it was absolutely key that they used Panavision widescreen for the whole movie. Well, obviously the whole movie, but and he was like, and Cundy says these are the three things. This is what makes this movie work so well, because the widescreen, and you see it in these shots when they're in the kitchen and she's on the phone. It's what allows her to move back and forth, and you still have enough space on the screen to have him just off the side.
Yes, because that is the thing. Because while she's on the phone, the shape is in the background, and you just see him in the gloom.
And then he'll be there and then he's not there.
Yep.
And then he is again.
Yep.
And he said, this is that, this is that idea of visual storytelling. He was like, this is what makes this movie so great. And if we hadn't done it if they hadn't agreed to these three things that he had, then it would not have worked, because so much of this movie is about open space. You start the film with all this open space. And as the movie goes along, these spaces get tighter and tighter until she's in the closet at the end. So everything's closing in on you. And he's like, we have all this space. If we hadn't had that space to do these shots, this wouldn't have felt menacing. It just would have been somebody on the phone spilling butter on their shirt.
Yeah. Yeah. But also, this is the moment when we finally see the shape. It's the best
because
look.
Now he's basically in the house with them.
And this is when we see it's a mask. Like if you did not already know that it's a mask, now you're like, oh, he's wearing a fucking mask. Like,
Yeah, he's not just some pasty motherfucker across the street.
yeah. So now Annie talks to her boyfriend Paul on the phone about coming over for some good times while the shape looms in the background. That's John Carpenter on the phone as Paul. Good thing Paul never comes over because he would be dead as fuck.
He would also get murdered.
Yep.
Hopefully in a similarly whimsical way.
Yep. She drops Lindsay off over at the Doyle place while she goes to pick up Paul.
Well, I mean, first she gets stuck in the laundry room.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Right. Her
For ... reasons.
her foot gets stuck. Lori is carving a pumpkin in the kitchen. And the thing is none of the pumpkins in this movie are actually pumpkins because this movie was made in California in April. You can't even get a fucking pumpkin in New Hampshire.
That's what they say. They're like, if we had tried to do this with pumpkins, they'd be dead the next day.
Yeah. So yeah.
This, by the way, is my second favorite scene.
The pumpkin carving?
Annie going.
Oh, when she goes over because now Lori's like real nice, looking good, and they have a whole thing. And then Annie goes back, she gets into her car, and she finds...
Oh, not yet. She goes to open the door to her car, and it is locked. So she has to go into the house because she's, Paul, no keys.
Oh, that's right.
Goes into the house to get the keys. And this is again, these really small moments where she comes out, and she doesn't really think, because this is what you do if you were just... on autopilot. She goes out, grabs the car, opens the door, and it doesn't occur to her the whole reason she went into the house was to get the keys because the car is locked.
Yes, because
she comes out to get in the car isn't locked.
Oh, yes. I know. Because what we're going to find out...
This brings up lots of questions. How did he get into the car if the car is locked?
Or why did he lock the door?
And I asked you that one time and you said, shut up, just watch the movie.
Yep. I know. But yeah, the whole thing with the keys is going to play a fucking pivotal role, and it's a really fucking smart thing that Carpenter does later on. But for now, Annie finally gets in, and the window is fogged on the inside. And she's like, "What the hell?" And that's when the fucking shape emerges from the darkness of the back seat, and
you get that loud, chaotic, sharp, like staccato sting.
Yeah. And he starts out by strangling her, and she goes up on the horn, and then he stabs her. But
it's terrible. It is terrible. Is the worst part.
It's terrible because you're so close, and this is one of those parts where the soundtrack gets overtaken by the breathing. Even overtakes the music a little bit. And so yeah, this is the very first time. This is the first kill since Judith. And God damn it!
No, you forgot the where he whips off his hospital gown.
Oh yeah, but fuck that.
Guy too. See that guy? We always forget that there are two people who are dead before he gets to town.
Yeah, poor Joe Grizzly.
And White Joe Grizzly.
White Joe Grizzly. Well, yeah, but this is
Joe Wisley.
Yeah,
I love a portmanteau.
So, and so it's just we. He's still obscuring the mask. Most of the kill takes place, like they cut it in half. Most of as it's happening is we're in the car. We're fucking right there with her as it's happening. And then it cuts to the outside and we see the mask, but it's again, fogged up windows and Annie is dead at this point. It's a very, very tight, claustrophobic, mean shot, Just a dead-eyed face of Captain Kirk murdering a poor teenage girl. So back inside, Lindsay and Tommy watch Forbidden Planet, a movie that rules. And Tommy moves to scare Lindsay, hiding behind the curtains by the window. But when he looks out, he sees the shape carrying Annie's dead body into the house. And so, meanwhile, we cut back to the fucking Myers house, and Loomis
again. What is this? What is this part? Is this to show his whimsical side?
Yeah, Loomis, like a creep, posted up outside the Myers house where Lonnie Elam and his asshole friends play chicken at the Myers house.
And he says, "Hey, Lonnie, get your ass away from there."
That's pretty good Loomis. Pretty good Loomis. Yep. And then Brackett finds him there and argues that nothing is happening. Boy, how wrong he is.
Yeah. This whole scene could be cut.
I know.
It is purely unimportant.
God, you are so right. If you cut the fucking Loomis scenes, except for the very end, the movie is fundamentally the same.
And I wonder if they're just sort of well, if we don't put him in the movie his being there at the end feels weird.
Yeah, it doesn't. You can't narratively have him just at the beginning and the end. He's got to get to Haddonfield.
Because then it really is just a Deus Ex character.
Yeah, he's got to get to Haddonfield. He has to sort of contextualize Michael a little bit. But then there's so much of him just hanging out next to the Myers house or in the Myers house doing nothing. And if you cut those scenes out, the movie doesn't really change much.
Well, and this is why, again, I'm drawing a lot of comparisons to Black Christmas, and that is for an obvious reason.
And it's also
they're very similar.
Totally fair. It plays Black Christmas. There would be no Halloween without Black Christmas,
right?
You know.
And the thing about Black Christmas, the thing that I think makes Black Christmas a better movie, is that you don't have a Loomis character.
Yeah.
You have a house full of women, and they're all awesome.
That's
the whole fucking movie.
You can call me on this. John Saxon is a little...
John Saxon, but there's a reason for John Saxon to be there, because it's like, obviously they're going to call the cops.
Yeah.
But and that's the extent of John Saxon. There's no hysterical, Ahab character here. And that is what Loomis is.
I think the hysterical character really starts in part 2. Here, I think he's a little bit more reserved, almost like he's just like, well, I'm here, I may as well act, I guess. What is my?
He is the human embodiment of a klaxon. He's here to warn the town.
Yeah, like he really turns into that character at the end of part 4, really.
But you don't have that in Black Christmas, which is why it's it is even more chilling. That's here's a dude who creeps into town, kills a bunch of people.
Oh man, I cannot wait to talk about that one. But yeah. So now Linda and Bob pull up to the Wallace place.
The good time gals are here.
Bob makes a really, really gross joke about Lindsay, ripping Linda's clothes off, then his own, and then Lindsay's clothes. And it's like, Bob, don't. Just don't.
And then he opens the door for Linda, and all the beer cans spill out like a goddamn Cheech and Chong movie.
Yep. They find the place empty, and they get to work doing it.
There is a great moment where they're in the living room for a little bit, and they get up to go upstairs. And I think this is meant to kind of mirror the part at the beginning where Judith Myers and her boyfriend.
Yeah.
But there's obviously a dolly track in the living room, and she trips over it. And you can see her kind of clomping through the living room.
Because she's got those fucking
giant boots.
She's got those 8-inch sandal platforms on.
But he just left it in because I guess he was just I don't know, it's fine. You just look like you're clomping through the house.
Yep. I mean, yeah, she's gonna trip.
You know who they remind me of? They remind me of the moment where what's his face in the old dark house when I can't remember his name. It's the guy who made Night of the Hunter.
Oh yeah, Lawton.
Yeah, and when Charles Lawton and his girlfriend blow into the house, they're just like, "Woo! Here we go." That's what Bob and Linda are.
Yeah. My God, you're right. Yep. They are 100. She's a showgirl.
They're here to have fun.
She's a showgirl, and he's just a dude who loves her company.
Yep.
Yep. So,
except in that movie, quite curiously, they never go upstairs to have sex, and there's a reason for that.
Yep. Little do Bob and Linda know that the shape is already there, and the shadow passes in the darkness.
And this is the first time that he's actually in the house with anybody.
Yeah. Yep. Because he's been outside the whole time.
Yep.
So yeah. Yep. So
these are those great, and I think this is the part of in Rob Zombie's movie that actually works pretty well too. Is all this lurking around the house where he's just sort of there watching them, but he doesn't do anything.
Yeah. Yep. He's biding his time, waiting for his moment. So yeah, Bob and Linda, they're getting busy. When they're finished, Bob gets up to get beers for the two of them, setting up one of the movie's iconic kills.
Yeah, I got a question. Why is there a lit jack-o'-lantern next to the bed?
Because it's Halloween.
Did the family leave that there?
They must have.
Bob and Linda bring that?
They must have brought it? Maybe? I don't know.
Why?
I have no idea. It's Halloween. That's just what you
They're
do.
like, well, we used it at the beginning, and we shot that this morning. Why don't you just put it in the house?
Yep.
No one will ever ask questions except for two assholes 45.
It's almost like somebody was on the set, and they're like, hey, what if the audience forgets that it's Halloween?
Yeah,
we'll just
they're gonna.
Yep. So yeah, he's rummaging around through the kitchen. goes to close.
And he goes, Linda, you asshole. I love that line.
Yeah. I the way that everybody talks to one another in this movie is great.
It's because it feels very natural.
Oh, yeah.
It's just like, this is how people talk to each other. When you have intimate relationships with people and you can be goofy and joke around, you say shit.
Right, because like in a minute, Michael's going to do something that Linda very earnestly mistakes for Bob just fucking around. So obviously that's something.
How many times do I wake up in the morning and I'm like, Michael, you fucking jerk. Zero. Actually, zero. I have never spoken to him that way.
Whom amongst us hasn't thrown a sheet over us and pretended to be a ghost silently for our lovers?
But this part is this is the part of the movie that I actually do find very jarring when he is opening Bob's opening all the closets.
Because he opens the closet and Michael charges out.
And he charges at him. It's like the only time in the movie. There's one other time where he moves a little bit quickly. But this is the only time where he moves aggressively.
Yeah. He pins Bob up, lifts him up easily, and then stakes him to the wall with a knife. And then this is the part that everybody knows. Everybody loves it. I fucking love it.
Because it has been replicated to death.
Yeah. Where Michael tilts his head side to side, like considering his work. Sort of.
And all Carpenter said was, I want you to look at him as though you're admiring your work.
Yeah.
And so this is the way that he decided to interpret that direction. And it is really brilliant.
Nick Castle,
creepy as hell.
You fucking genius. Yeah. So
Nick Castle, you goofy bastard.
Yeah. But the soundtrack, when this happens, the soundtrack again drowned out by Carpenter's music and that breathing again. Like, they're inseparable. They got to have them. It's awesome. So upstairs, the shape sneaks up on Linda, pretending to be Bob, wearing a sheet like a ghost and Bob's glasses. And Linda, eventually, not feeling what she thinks is a joke. At first, she thinks he's hilarious. Pulls the sheets down, shows him her boobs.
This is the only part that feels a little gratuitous, which I mean, it's fine.
You know what? I'll tell you what. Carpenter. This has to be like some of the only nudity Carpenter's ever done.
Yeah, probably.
It probably came from producers. It's a cheap movie. You got to have it, but it doesn't.
I mean, but it doesn't feel. It feels gratuitous, but it doesn't feel like it's not. It doesn't feel wrong or out of place. It's like, okay, if one of them's going to do it, it's going to be her.
Right, and the thing.
And it's done in good fun.
That's the thing. Here's the thing. He doesn't linger. And it's not like
this was my problem with the Rob Zombie scene, because when he does it in that movie, I found that scene to be completely tasteless. I thought it was horrible. It was completely unnecessary and awful because it is a shirtless woman being torn apart by someone.
Yeah.
She does do this, but it's sort of like, it just feels like it's a little playful. It's a little fun. Is it a little crude? Sure.
Yeah.
But you get that sense that is this character.
Yeah. But also not out of place for a fucking movie, like a low budget horror movie in the 70s. Like mainstream motion pictures were just like chock full of boobs at the time. So it is what it is. But again, he doesn't linger. He doesn't fucking zoom in on them. Most of the time they're, everything's out of frame. They just kind of pop in. It's just, it's the way he does it that makes it feel, like I said, it's kind of natural,
Because he's so heavily influenced by these guys that were 20, 30 years older than him and had been making movies for, in the 40s and 50s and 60s. That is what this movie essentially is. It's just, it's a Hitchcock movie for 1978, whereas the movie Hitchcock made in 1976,
Family Plot?
Family Plot is like, oh God.
Yeah. Yep.
So I think it's fair to say John Carpenter, successor to Alfred Hitchcock.
Oh yeah, picking up where the dude left off. But yeah, so now Linda is just like, all right, whatever, Bob, fuck this. She picks up the phone to call Laurie, and as Laurie picks up, the shape attacks. She thinks that it's Annie fucking around again because of a prank call of Annie before when Annie called her and just like chewed food.
She was eating something. So she says, first I get your famous chewing, now I get your famous breathing.
Yeah.
You're like, no, you get her famous not breathing.
Yeah. So
that's the problem.
So now
Laurie, call the police.
So now Linda is dead. And the shape picks up the phone, and this is the first time that we see the mask like full on. And it's all.
And there's something about this scene that's so awesome, even though it just feels kind of obvious and.
He's just, well, you know what it is it's a combination of the fact that Michael is never in a hurry. except for when he's like struggling to fucking murder somebody. But like he slowly picks up the phone and puts it up to his like rubber ear. But at the same time, it's just they do, you know, blue for nighttime lighting, and it's him lit by the blue, surrounded by just darkness. And so he's this face on the phone with Laurie in the darkness. It's you know, it's the more of just the way that Castle is portraying this character. It's a hell of a payoff, you know. So meanwhile,
well, I think it's also helped by the fact that all of the houses in this, and this sort of aids to the whole aesthetic, every house feels so empty. And it's that feeling of suburbia again, where it's like, it all feels so vacant.
Yeah.
Like these are places that are supposed to be alive. Cities are alive. These are places that just, you don't feel like anyone's there.
Yeah.
The houses are empty. They're all dark. And that's what makes this mask work so well.
This neighborhood is dead. Like,
it's
not clear how late it is. It's probably not very late, actually.
Can't be that late. The kids are still awake.
Yeah. So, like, but like when every time we look out, there's not a fucking light on. There's no cars driving by. It's just Orange Grove Ave. You know, it's a quiet night. Meanwhile, back at the Myers house, Loomis turns, and for the first time all night, he notices that the Smiths Grove station wagon is parked, like, right next to him.
Which is amazing, because this car is in every fucking frame of this movie.
Yeah. So now he's...
For someone who's so obsessed, he's not very perceptive.
No. But now he starts to sort of, like, patrol the neighborhood. And so Laurie finds Annie's keys in the Doyle living room. And this is, like, again, this is it's an important detail that I only just recently noticed. Like,
yeah, this is when Jimmy Stewart picks up the champagne cork off the floor in front of the trunk and rope.
Yeah, so it's
when someone starts to realize something's wrong.
Yeah, it's a neat, because they got to get Laurie over to the Wallace house. And it's, you know, it's a very small detail. It's very neat. If you're not paying attention, it still fucking works. But like to have this moment where you're like, oh shit. Now she realizes that there's a problem, because she's going to go across the street to the Wallace house and fucking all hell is going to break loose, because we're turning the corner into the final act. And so she gets over there, and she sort of walks up.
This is another great use of that, of the darkness again, where she walks up the stairs and there's only one crack of light.
Yes,
that she can see.
Oh my god, I love it,
bedroom.
because it's
so alluring.
Because because everything else is black and blue, but the door crack is orange. Because, you know,
and it's not like a light coming from underneath the door. The door is cracked open, so it's got this sort of L shape, and it's like very compelling to look at.
Yep.
You're drawn to it.
Yep. So she's in the house, but before she gets there, she's in the house. She keeps hearing like sounds, and she thinks everybody's fucking with her, because everybody's been fucking with her for the whole movie. But from here on out, it is all shadows and high contrast, blacks and blues, and it is a great setup.
Yeah, it's not your friends, Laurie. Your friends are dead.
Yeah. So this is it.
Even Bob, who you probably didn't like.
Bob seems okay. Except for that Lindsay comment. But yes, so
it's the 70s. He's being sexy.
the 70s were.
Like, we'll just put her in the waterbed and off we go.
Yep. But now she does. She goes. She sees that crack of light. She goes in. She opens the door. She finds Annie's body spread out on the bed beneath the headstone of Judith Myers, and this is where we get the scream that made Jamie Lee Curtis. It's a very distinct sound. It almost sounds like two screams like played as a composite. It's such a weird sound. And now, like, yeah, she opens up a cupboard and fucking Bob's body.
Now, here's a thing that I've never understood about the Bob part. Why does he fall down from the ceiling?
What is he suspended?
He's hanging there. What is he hanging from?
Yeah.
And why is he placed in such a way that it's like, okay, here's what's going to happen. She's going to come up. She's going to see the thing, right? She's going to get real freaked out. Going to turn around. She's going to grab the closet, right?
Yep.
This is how it's going to go. She's going to open it up and bam, he swings down. Like, this takes an awful lot.
It's pretty contrived. And then,
but I think this is also the one insight you have into what's happening in this movie is he is essentially killing his sister over and over again.
yes.
They're just women. They're just his sister to him. It doesn't matter who they are. And again, that goes back to that anonymity. He's not there to kill them. He's just there to kill women.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, that was
and one specific woman, he's just killing her again and again.
And that's like, I mean, that's kind of a like one of the theories of Ted Bundy, right? Is every murder was him murdering the same woman over again.
Yeah, it was his wife.
Yeah.
Must have felt real nice when she heard that. How do you live with that for the rest of your life?
Yeah. But yeah, but then she finds Linda. Linda's like mouth is like hanging open and her eyes are crossed.
Linda is in a very like I don't know. It's a very like Herschel Gordon Lewis. You're piled up in the closet kind of thing. Like she's in like the linen closet, squished in there.
Yep. So now Laurie slumps against a door jamb, grief stricken, and the way that the shot is framed.
This is the scene that he wanted to do, and this is the one where 4K does not do it much service because there's a dimmer switch on the light.
Yeah. Oh,
and he emerges from the shadow.
Right. And again, this is one of the iconic scenes where Laurie is like leaning against the door and there's an open door to one of the hallway and it's just blackness. It's just darkness. And, Michael emerges sort of slowly from the gloom. But
the way it was supposed to work and the way it did work in the, if you saw the original print was they bring the light up slowly as so he's walking forward and they're bringing the light up so you see just this sort of like sliver of white and then the closer he gets they're slowly turning it so his face emerges sort of like when the Pazuzu thing like you see Pazuzu and you just see the face. It's sort of a little bit like that where it just emerges out of the shadow and it's just his face.
Yeah,
but it doesn't work that way because it's so high contrast.
Yeah, it still works.
It's incredible. It's an incredible shot, but like Kunde is sort of like it's not as effective as it was originally.
Yeah. It's great, but yeah, iconic scene. But he attacks, kind of scratches her, and this is where she goes over the railing and sort of onto the steps below. So apparently, the one sort of producer note, the one thing that Irwin Yablans required for this movie was a staircase because a couple of like high profile horror movies at the time involved staircases. Now, The Exorcist and Psycho has a staircase that's
because Arbogast falls down the stairs.
Yep.
in a very similar way. Like I think the camera trick is the same.
That's one of those dolly zooms where like the background moves but he doesn't.
It's not quite that. I don't really know how they do it. I think they lower the camera and then speed up the film eventually because it looks like you're falling, but it's really just a slow shot down the straight down.
Recently watched Psycho
but it's not the Jaws shot. The pulling back and zooming in.
Right. Yeah. I recently watched Psycho and that fall is notable for a reason. It's a wicked weird shot. Yeah.
But it's like basically the same shot here.
Yeah. So this is how, because again, this is like the hits keep on coming. This is how we get that sort of iconic shot of Michael at the top of the steps where he's just a fucking shadow.
And this is the other moment where he moves quickly. Because she's getting away.
Yeah, and he comes down the steps real fast. Laurie is desperate to escape, so she locks the shape out of the kitchen, but he punches his way through the door and approaches. And she breaks a window in the back door to get out into the street and run.
And that is Tommy Lee Wallace's hand going through the window.
Oh, no shit. Yeah, she runs out screaming while he calmly pursues her. And then this is what we were talking about before. She runs up to this one house where they hear her screaming and they turn on the light and then somebody like looks out the window and then just fucking nopes out and they shut the light off.
And this is suburbia. This is the Kitty Genovese thing. Not that Kitty Genovese didn't happen in suburbia, but it's that idea of you used to know all your neighbors. You could rely on them and now you can't. Yep. This is that fear of changing society.
Yep. Not my chair, not my problem.
Yeah. Look at this bitch. The fuck she thinks she is.
Mr. Balloon Hands. So now Lori gets Tommy Doyle to open up the door. She's outside of the Doyle
After
house.
chucking a planter at the window.
She's like, Tommy, let me in.
That's because this is the part where she's like, keys,
the keys. And Tom, but meanwhile, Tommy like looks out the window and he's like, huh? Yeah, hey, all right. I'll just like she's bothering him.
Yeah, Lindsay wouldn't have done that.
No, Lindsay would have been on point.
She would have been right there.
So once inside, she tries to call the cops, but the phone is dead and the back door is wide open in the shape.
He's sneaky.
He is sneaky.
He's getting sneaky.
He's got legs. He's all over the place.
Because he's about to be real sneaky in a minute.
Yep. So he
in a moment that I don't quite understand.
He attacks again. And this is where she's at the sofa.
He pops up was he waiting crouched down behind the sofa?
He must have been.
Is that what he's doing? Where he's like, okay, like before when she saw the thing and then bumped in and then opened all the doors. Here's what's gonna happen. I'm gonna be crouched down behind the thing. She's gonna come in. She's gonna be real scared. She's gonna get down on the couch and I'm gonna pop up real slow behind the couch, scare the crap out of her.
Yep. He's thinking. That's the thing. And so this is what she jams a fucking knitting needle into his neck, which he pulls out very suddenly and then falls over for like the first time. And then he
takes a pretty hard beating at the end of this movie.
Yes, he does. He basically he attacks with a knife and then he drops it when she stabs him. And so she takes the knife and she throws it aside, which drives people nuts.
Yeah. Because it's the first time that she's going to do it, and then she's going to
do it again. The second time, I can definitely be like, God damn it, Lori, just fucking stab him in the face or something. But the first time,
you either go Friday the 13th Part 4 or you don't.
Yeah. So the thing is what she has since explained was when she looked at the knife, the prop is actually bloody and like nasty. And in past versions, you couldn't tell. It just looks like a knife. But in the UHD version of it, you can actually see it a little bit. And so she's like disgusted by it. And
because he has used this to kill 3 of her friends.
Yeah. And so she discards it very suddenly.
And maybe one guy at a truck stop.
Yeah. Yeah. Joe Grizzly. And so now again, Loomis is stalking the neighborhood. And Lori goes to check on the kids, telling them that she killed the boogeyman, to which Tommy tells her, You can't kill the boogeyman.
And that is the thesis of the entire movie.
Yep. Shadows move behind Lori, and we find that the shape is still alive. So Lori secures the kids, and she hides in the closet in my favorite scene in the entire fucking movie.
Because this is the culmination of all this openness and these sort of like slowly tightening shots. The culmination of all of that is the two of them crammed into this tiny space.
She does what it's a fucking reasonable thing to do. She's terrified.
Yeah, except she's doing it the whole time. She's making these loud, whimpering sounds. Bitch, if you're going to lock yourself in a closet, shut the fuck up.
Silence. You got to be quiet or he's going to know, because he does, But
yeah, he sneaks and he creeps.
Yep. But she is now like surrounded on all sides in a way that's sort of like I can't speak for everybody, but like it is comforting when you're nervous, you're anxious.
It works if you're playing Call of Duty.
Yeah, to back yourself into a corner so nobody can attack you from behind. But yeah, like
if you're hiding from a giant with a knife, probably not the best place.
Yeah, but yeah, she does this, and so this is where he's like, yanking on the doors, and he punches his way in, and I fucking love this. His fist gets hung up on the drawstring for the light, and so suddenly
because this is that light and shadow. You have a hanging bulb getting knocked around in an otherwise pitch black space.
Yeah, and suddenly it's light in a movie that for the last fucking half an hour has taken place in the dark. And we see Michael in the light for the first time, briefly, because he shuts it off again. But yeah, to defend herself, she does the only thing she can think of. She grabs a wire hanger and unfurls it, and she stabs him in the eye. And
pretty resourceful,
yeah,
I will say.
And
I don't know that I would think to do that.
I know. He drops the knife, she grabs it, she stabs him, and he falls back, presumably dead again.
Because she does stab him in the chest.
Yes.
That's where all the important stuff is.
Oh yeah, you got all sorts of important business right in there that your body can't operate without. But it's the shape. So she gets out again, discards the knife right fucking next to him, and walks over. And now she checks on the children. She tells them to run downstairs and get help. And they do. They run out,
Run to the Mackenzies.
screaming into the street. Loomis sees them and he goes, aha, Michael Myers is there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
This is why he is in this movie. This is why he has been creeping around town being a fucking weirdo for the last hour and a half.
Yeah. But so once the kids are safe, she sort of collapses in the doorway and God damn it, I fucking love this. It's corny. If you look,
the ab control here is impressive.
He sits up from a laying position.
It is a little bit cheesy because it's like, this is so robotic and weird.
Because he does it, he sits up, he does like that flat setup, and then he kind of like how RoboCop moves, where like he turns.
I was gonna say, it's a little bit like Harpo Marx, where he sort of leans up and he's like, you!
Because then he like,
there you are.
Slowly turns his head, and then we cut to Laurie again, and Loomis is coming into the house, and then we see him do this thing. It's almost like he's doing like some yoga shit, where he like.
This is the RoboCop part.
Yeah, he like rolls upward very suddenly and comes at her and attacks her again.
Just one vertebrae at a time.
Yep. So now they struggle.
This is Tony Moran.
Yes, they struggle in the hallway. And she pulls off the mask, and this is not Nick Castle. Nick Castle was too old to play somebody who was supposed to be like 21 years old. He doesn't look.
Was he too old or was he too ugly? Because the reason that Tony Moran isn't here is because John Carpenter wanted someone who looked beautiful and angelic. Now, I'm going to push back on that a little bit because what I consider beautiful and angelic is clearly a lot different than what John Carpenter considers. Because Tony Moran looks kind of fucked up. Now, granted, he has been stabbed in the eye.
Yeah, he's got that jacked up eye appliance on.
But yeah, he wanted someone who looked sort of the antithesis of what you'd expect of a monster. He wanted something beautiful looking. I guess. I mean, you don't really see him head on, so it doesn't matter. Like, you see his face.
That's the thing is it's a very important moment because up to this point, you don't really know what to expect. And you probably don't even really expect the mask is going to come off because like, it's kind of like I lose sight of that. And it sort of goes to sort of the genius of the movie is you lose sight of the fact on purpose that there is a person under this mask.
Right. Who is the killer? It doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. But
that's the whole point of the movie. It doesn't matter.
When the mask comes off and you see it's just a fucking kid, it's a guy, there's an impact to it, you know?
I also like that he moves, he's very hastily pulls it back on.
Yes, and it's important to him that he gets the mask back on.
That she does not see him.
Yeah. And so now Loomis is there. He shoots him. He falls back. Loomis chases.
How many times does he shoot?
6 times?
6 goddamn times.
Yeah.
Shoots him 6 goddamn times.
And so he shoots him and he goes over the railing into the garden. And Laurie is like, it was the boogeyman. To which Loomis says.
And he says, as a matter of fact, it was.
Yep. And then they go and check.
And
he's gone. And he's gone. And then what we get is a montage.
These are all insert shots at the end.
Yeah, it's a montage of all of the scenes where the mayhem was taking place.
Because they got to the end of the production, and I guess someone was like, "Is that how it ends?" And he was like, "Oh shit, I can't end it like that."
Yeah.
And so he decides to go around and show the neighborhood, and with the idea being that like he could be anywhere, he could be everywhere, and you get that. They really kind of prop that up with the breathing.
Yes, because the breathing gets louder and louder and louder until the shot ends on the Myers house. Cut to black. Halloween. Roll credits.
Fucking banger.
God damn it. Yeah, and it's just like you said it, and I think I said it almost at the same time. I could have just started the fucking movie over right again and just been like happy to watch it again.
And because it is all of these really small touches. It's Debra Hill's writing. It's Dean Cundy's camera work. It's John Carpenter's sort of creativity and willingness to be the leader of an actual group of creative people and not just try to lord over the production.
Yes. It's a clinic on how to make a good movie. Like if you set out with good intentions, where your intention is not leave the fucking money to the executive producers. That's their intention.
And I don't think we see this again until like Desperado or the one right before it.
I would say, yes. So El Mariachi, that's the thing.
Yeah, I don't think you see it again until then.
That's a very good point because Robert Rodriguez, he dominates Hollywood in such a way that he gets to call his own shots at a time when, like, even Quentin...
And he's making genre films.
Yeah. And also, he is extremely heavily influenced by John Carpenter. There are scenes from Escape from New York that are in Machete, like, beat for beat. So, like, Carpenter's influence on everybody is... on people, or at least people who really understand him. It's profound. You know, this is how you make a fucking entertaining movie that was also, you know, commercially successful. This might be, well, no, like Escape from New York is very successful. He makes a bunch of movies that make a lot of money, but the box...
Not at this level.
Not at this level. From this moment on, like, box office for John Carpenter is kind of like a series of just diminishing returns, but he remains consistently good.
And creatively. I mean, I think he rides out, I'm going to say, up to...
Prince of Darkness?
Prince of Darkness is pretty good. I would say a little bit before that. They are solid through and through. And so you get to They Live, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. Up to that.
I mean, and that's, I fucking love They Live to Death. I think that, yeah, like once you get into the night,
he runs out of juice a little bit after that. It all feels kind of half-hearted. It's not bad stuff.
He gets one great blast in the 90s with In the Mouth of Madness, but
even that doesn't have the same feel that these movies have. He had this moment of, like, just sheer creativity in all ways. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that he's willing to listen to other people and he's willing to let them do their thing that he hired them to do, that he knew they could do because they've been working together since 78.
Yeah. I think I've said it in both of the previous Halloween movies. When we talk about John Carpenter, I feel like his best work happens when he has a collaborator. And up until, like, you know, like eventually things start to fall off when Debra goes off to do her own thing. Eventually the music starts. I mean, this soundtrack is all him, but, like, he really picks up steam when he starts working with Alan Howarth.
Yeah.
So, like, you know, as long as he's got somebody to, like, kind of bounce
and
ideas
these are really stripped down stories. I mean, he doesn't overthink this movie, and because he doesn't overthink it, you don't really overthink it. The same with The Fog. The Fog is barely a story.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's my favorite of his movies.
No shit. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. This movie, and I don't like, this word gets overused a lot. I do not use it lightly. This movie is elegant as fuck. It's every single piece that a good movie needs is there, and they're all working together in a way that sort of, like, influences the rest. God, it is more than the sum of its parts. It's such a fucking great movie.
And I think the part that there are missteps along the way, and I think that they're unavoidable in a certain way. Like the stuff with Loomis, he kind of had to put it in there for one reason or another. You couldn't get by without it, and it feels a little bit sort of shoehorned.
Yeah. The fact that everybody who comes after Carpenter, who makes a Halloween movie, feels like they have to have Loomis in there is such a strange detail. Because if they were like, okay, Brian, pitch us a movie with Halloween, my script would not have Loomis in it.
But it's what I think is what we were saying before. What does this movie mean to me? It's the story about these three female friends. What do the all white male filmmakers do? It's a story about Michael Myers and his Ahab. Like, who fucking cares about that? That's the most boring part of the story. Yeah. That's the direction they take it in.
Yeah. Well, also, I think that it happened out of necessity because they could still get Donald Pleasance, but they could not get Jamie Lee Curtis.
Right. You killed off everybody else, and then Jamie Lee Curtis was too big at that point.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, she didn't even really want to do the second one, but
Carpenter didn't even want to, so that's how he ends up just writing it. But yeah. This movie is a singularity. The effect that it has on horror movies going forward, it is a paradigm shift in the same way that Last House on the Left was. In the same way that fucking Blair Witch Project is going to be, in 20 years. It's one of those singular moments that changes literally everything on a fucking shoestring budget.
This leads to my question that I have for you. We have seen this movie over the last 30 plus years. We have each seen this movie countless times. How does this hold up today as a horror movie?
It ages like fucking wine. Like it's a movie that when I first saw it, I liked it quite a bit. It's ostensibly the first slasher movie I ever saw, but I didn't really start to appreciate it until I saw it more and more. And I certainly didn't appreciate it until like I was really like an adult. When I was a kid, I just wanted to see everything, and I liked the cheesiest, trashiest shit best. So like I gravitated to Friday the 13th, and then like once I had something to sort of compare against Halloween, I was like, oh well, fucking Jason is way better than Michael Myers. But as I got older, I was like, I think I like Halloween the best. And so, you know, I really came around to it. And now, like I said, the more I watch it, the more I like it. I see more details to it. Every time I see it, there's something fucking new. I appreciate it in a different way every time I watch it. It's a fucking great movie.
I would agree. I would say with all these other movies, like I think Blair Witch is a good example because it is, as much as I don't like it, it is a significant film in the sort of history of American horror. And it's significant when I know the backstory. I don't have to know the backstory to this movie to enjoy it and to see all the brilliance. I don't need to know all the shit that we just spouted for the last 3 hours. I don't have to know any of that to watch this and say, this is this is a movie made by skilled people who know exactly what they're doing, and they effectively convey absolutely everything that they're trying to convey.
Yeah,
it's beautiful and incredible by the time.
It's crazy because Carpenter made this movie when he was 30 years old. He fucking nailed it. This is, and I think personally, of all of his movies, Escape from New York is my favorite. This, however, is his fucking magnum opus. Like this is
This is a beautiful film.
Yeah. Yep. So
yeah, I think it holds up perfectly.
Yeah. So beautiful, in fact, that it is. You know, I think it's in the Library of Congress as like a significant movie. I'm so glad that we slogged our way through lesser movies to get to this point, because
I don't ever want to do that
I
again.
know, man. When I got to Rob Zombie's Halloween, I was like, man, am I regretting this fucking idea?
Look, I'll talk about 90s movies. I'll talk about movies that came out 20 minutes ago.
Yeah,
not the early 2000s. Jesus.
Yeah. All right, what are we doing next?
That's a good question.
We're getting back into some real serious garbage territory.
Oh yeah, we're going back to being off the rails.
Yep. We are going to do a movie called Elves, which I discovered just this year, and I cannot wait to talk about it because it is fucked up wall to wall.
We planned out most of our months way in advance, and then got to November, and we're like, well, I guess here's where all the crap goes.
We've got a good November planned, but we are starting off with a fucked up one. This is a movie that I cannot wait to get to it to tell everybody about it. But this is a movie where twice in the process of watching it, I audibly said out loud to nobody in particular, "Gross."
Well, I look forward to it. I've actually not seen this movie. I have only ever heard the soundtrack.
It's a deep cut too, and I was surprised that Terror Vision put the soundtrack out because the soundtrack's not very good. I don't think.
I'd say it holds up on its own. It's part of my. I will be soon pulling out my Christmas records, of which there are only about 10. So.
All right. Well, Jesus Christ! Thanks for sticking with us for 3 hours of us worshiping John Carpenter at Halloween. We'll see you in 2 weeks with Elves.